Hi everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. I hope you're doing well tonight. Before we start, please give the video a like if you enjoy the stories. And if you've ever had a strange experience you can't explain, feel free to send it to me. The first story tonight comes from a couple who often went for late-night walks around their neighborhood. It was something completely normal for them, until one night, they noticed a tall man standing on the path ahead. That's where things started to feel very wrong. All right, let's begin. And I hope you sleep well. I'm going to tell you about something that still makes my stomach tighten whenever I think about it. Me and my girlfriend Liana had this little routine for years. We lived on a quiet road in the UK, the kind of place where nothing really happens after dark, and most weekends, we'd go out for a late walk. Sometimes we'd just wander around the neighborhood. Other times, we'd head up to the field behind our house with a pair of binoculars and look at the stars for a while. It was normal for us, comforting, really. We'd done it so many times that we never felt nervous about it. Not once. Usually, we were back home before midnight, but on this particular night, neither of us could sleep. It was around 1 in the morning when we finally decided to go out and clear our heads. The street was strangely empty. I know streets are quiet at that hour, but this felt different. There were barely any lights on in the houses. No cars passed, no dogs barked, no distant voices. It was just this thick, heavy silence sitting over everything. We tried to ignore it and kept walking toward the field behind our house. To get there, you have to go through this narrow path between tall hedges. There are no windows looking over it, no streetlights properly reaching it, just this dark little passage that opens out toward the hill. We were talking quietly, laughing a bit, trying to shake off that sleepless feeling. And then we both stopped. Just like that. About 20 steps ahead of us, there was a man standing in the path. He was facing the hedge. The thing is, neither of us saw him walk there. The path had been empty, I'm certain of that. One moment there was nothing in front of us, and the next, he was just there, standing completely still, like he'd been placed there. And he was tall. Not just slightly taller than average, unnaturally tall. Tall enough that on such a narrow path, there's no possible way we would have missed him. He was dressed in what looked like black leather from head to toe. At first, he didn't move at all. He just stood there, turned toward the hedge. I couldn't see his face properly, even though we were close enough that I should have been able to. There were no clear features, no eyes catching the light, no nose shape, no expression. It looked almost smooth, like skin stretched over the place where a face should have been. Then he started moving. And this is the part I hate trying to explain, because there's no way to describe it without sounding ridiculous. His body looked like it was walking in one direction, but he was moving in another. It was like he was facing sideways and making the motions of walking forward, stiff arms, legs stepping normally. But instead of going where his body was pointed, he was drifting diagonally toward us. The movement didn't match the direction. It reminded me of a broken character in a video game, when the animation glitches and the body slides across the ground in a way it shouldn't. His steps were jerky for a second, then weirdly smooth, then wrong again. Like something had learned how walking looked, but not how it actually worked. And he was getting closer. That was the worst part. He was moving toward us in this impossible sliding way, and there was no sound at all. No footsteps. No breathing. No rustle of clothing. Nothing. I grabbed Liana's hand and started backing us away. Neither of us spoke at first. I remember whispering, "Don't look at him," even though I was still staring right at him. Then we turned around and walked home as fast as we could without fully running. After a few seconds, I looked back. He was gone. Not walking away, not standing in the path. Gone, The whole way home, I kept checking behind us, expecting to see him at the end of the street or right behind us somehow. But every time I turned around, there was nothing. Just empty road, dark houses, and that awful quiet. Then, while we were still walking back, we both noticed something in the sky. 3 bright dots. They were moving together in a perfect triangle formation, way faster than any plane I've ever seen. Completely silent, too. They crossed the sky and disappeared out of sight in seconds. Maybe it had nothing to do with the man. Maybe. But after what we'd just seen, it felt connected in the worst possible way. When we got home, we locked the door and immediately started describing what we had seen. We both remembered it the same way. The height, the black clothing, the blank face, the impossible way he moved. We weren't drunk. We weren't on anything. We were wide awake by then, believe me. For a little while, we tried to calm down. Then our Ring doorbell notification went off. There is someone at your front door. Our bedroom window was open, which suddenly felt like the stupidest mistake in the world. We froze and listened. At first, we heard low grunting outside, like someone was hurt or struggling to breathe. Then there were slow, scraping footsteps near the house, dragging almost. Then, suddenly, another set of footsteps started, faster ones, like someone else was moving quickly outside. And then everything stopped. Dead silent again. We checked the Ring camera straight away. There was nobody there. The street was empty the entire time. No one at the door, no one walking past, nothing visible on the camera at all. To this day, I don't know what we saw on that path. I don't know what those lights were, and I don't know what triggered the doorbell afterward. But I know this much. Whatever that man was, he did not move like a normal person. And both of us still believe he followed us home. Hey there, I want to share a story that's really close to my heart. It's about a girl named Lily, a spirited 12-year-old from down under, Australia to be exact, who had a rather unusual quirk. You see, whenever Lily came out of the water, people would get scared of her. It was as if they saw a monster instead of a sweet girl. It was baffling and, honestly, quite sad. I had always felt that every child deserves a loving home, so I decided to become a foster parent. The kids I met had their own unique quirks. One was convinced she had to be right all the time. Another forgot how to do simple things. And some had odd little habits that made them stand out. But Lily was different. There was something special about her. One day, after washing my hands, I playfully splashed a little water on Lily. Instead of fear, she looked up at me with the most adorable smile. That moment, I knew I wanted to adopt her. No questions asked. I told her she was beautiful just as she was, especially when she came out of the water. Over time, things changed. People stopped screaming when Lily emerged from a swim. They treated her with kindness and respect. It turned out that Lily's fear of being seen as different made her insecure, and that insecurity was what caused the fear in others. But love and acceptance worked wonders. Now, Lily is 19. She's still with me, and she's hesitant about dating because she worries others won't understand her. It's understandable, really. She has her ups and downs, times when she's bubbly and confident, and others when she retreats into her insecurities. One thing I've noticed is her love for open water, ponds, canals, where she can stay submerged for hours. It's her happy place. But sometimes, that happiness worries me because it feels intense, almost overwhelming. A few months ago, I saw her with a young man, her boyfriend. She was so happy, but what happened next was a bit unsettling. She insisted he stay in the pond as long as she did, and when he couldn't, she'd get upset. It was hard to watch, but I didn't want to spoil her joy. Then one evening, she pulled him back into the water when he tried to leave. Unfortunately, he didn't make it out alive. Lily was devastated, blaming him for not staying as she wished. After that, she fell back into her darker, insecure phase. Late one night, I went to the pond to check on them. What I found chilled me. There were others, many others, at the bottom of the water. Past boyfriends who had been caught in this strange cycle. It was heartbreaking. Despite all this, when Lily's in her good moments, she's caring and loving, especially towards me. She cooks breakfast, checks in on me like a devoted daughter. She's got another boyfriend now, and while I worry, I also appreciate the bond we share. Lily's story is one of love, acceptance, and the struggles that come with being different. It's taught me that sometimes understanding and patience can change everything. And I'll always be here for her, through every splash and every smile. I want to tell you about something that supposedly happened in Taiwan in the late 1990s. It started as a simple family hike. A family had gone out to Dakang Scenic Area in Taichung, just wanting to spend the day together in the mountains. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual. Just relatives walking along the trail, talking, taking in the trees, the rocks, the quiet air, the kind of outing people remember more for the feeling than the details. One of them, a man named Liang, had brought along an old camcorder. And if you have ever seen home videos from that time, you know exactly what I mean. The picture was soft and grainy. The colors looked a little faded. Every step made the camera shake. It had that familiar, ordinary look of a family memory caught on tape. At the time, nobody noticed anything strange. They walked near the well-known wind-moving stone, filming each other as they moved along the mountain path. Everyone seemed relaxed. The day felt normal. But later, when the family watched the recording again, something in the footage made them go quiet. Behind the group, near the very back, there was a small figure dressed in red. She looked like a little girl, and she seemed to be following them. The unsettling part was not just that she was there. It was that nobody remembered seeing her at all. She was not with the family. She had not spoken to anyone. Nobody remembered passing her on the trail. Nobody remembered a child walking behind them. She did not smile at the camera or try to get anyone's attention. She just stayed there, silent, close enough to appear clearly in the video. And then there was her face. Because the footage was old and blurry, it was hard to make out every detail. But people who later watched the tape said her face did not seem quite right. Some thought she looked too old to be a child. Some said her features looked warped. Others felt there was something deeply unnatural about her expression. The video eventually made its way to a Taiwanese paranormal television show called Shenchu Gui Mo. When it aired, people across Taiwan became frightened by it. You have to remember, this was not the age of endless creepy videos online. Back then, stories traveled through television, newspapers, neighbors, relatives, and whispered retellings. So when people saw what looked like a real family tape, with that red-clad child walking behind them, it landed differently. It felt closer, more possible. Then came the rumors. People began saying that someone connected to the hiking group died after the trip. Whether every part of that claim was true or not, it made the story grow darker. Soon, people started connecting the girl in red to old Taiwanese beliefs about the mountains. The idea was that something had followed them, or that someone had been marked, or that the little girl was not really a little girl at all. Over time, many began linking her to the legend of the Mo Sin Ah. Now, Mo Sin Ah are not exactly ghosts in the way many people think of ghosts. In Taiwanese folklore, they are more like strange mountain beings. They are said to live in forests, bamboo groves, valleys, and misty trails, places where the path can feel familiar one moment and completely wrong the next. Some stories describe them as small and childlike. Others say they seem monkey-like. Sometimes they are said to wear red. Sometimes they have red eyes or red hats. But what makes them frightening is not that they attack people outright. It is that they confuse them. The stories say a person led away by Mo Sin Ah may suddenly become lost in a place they should know. They may vanish for hours or even days. And when they are found, they often seem exhausted, dazed, and unable to explain what happened. Some say they were given food, but later, people wonder if what they were really eating was mud, grass, insects, or something else from the forest floor. And Taiwan has many stories that follow that same eerie shape. In one case, an elderly woman went into the mountains near Shiji with her family to visit a grave. She walked ahead only briefly, but when the others went looking for her, she was gone. Her family searched desperately, even using old folk methods like beating gongs and calling her name, hoping the sound would guide her back. Days later, she was found dead. In another story from Hualien, an elderly woman disappeared and was later found after heading toward a rural mountain road. She reportedly said a little girl in red had led her away, and that older people had kept her company at night. And in Kaohsiung, another elderly woman vanished after going out near the fields. When she was finally found, weak but alive, near a mountain cemetery, she said someone had taken her somewhere to rest and had even prepared food for her. Now, none of this proves that Mosina are real, but the pattern is what makes people uneasy. Someone leaves a familiar place. They disappear suddenly, and when they return, they cannot clearly explain where they were. That is why the girl in red stayed in people's minds for so long. Maybe she really was just another child on the trail, made strange by bad video quality and an old camera. Maybe the television show shaped the story to make it scarier. Maybe people saw what they were already afraid of seeing. Or maybe, as some still believe, the family recorded something that belonged to the mountain. The truth is, no one has ever given a clear answer, and that is the part that lingers. Because if she was only another hiker, why did nobody remember her? And if you are ever walking through the mountains and you hear soft footsteps behind you, or a small voice calling from the trees, maybe do not turn around too fast. You know, I was about 16 when this happened. My family and I were visiting the coast of Gulf Shores, Alabama, and there was this ominous storm rolling in, with dark, swirling clouds hanging low over the water. The ocean was restless, waves crashing like thunder, and the sea was rougher than usual. I was out there, boogie boarding, just wanting to catch one last wave before heading back. Suddenly, something icy cold grazed my leg, and in the blink of an eye, I was pulled under the surface. In that terrifying moment, it felt like I was a crab caught in a fisherman's net, both screaming inside and choking on salty water. I could feel this immense, unyielding force tugging me away from shore. My fingers clawed at the sand beneath me, but it just slipped away. Wrapped tightly around my ankle was something cold and unshakable. That's when it hit me. It wasn't a typical riptide. Something was holding on to me, dragging me deeper and farther from the beach. I tried to hold my breath as long as I could, but eventually, my survival instincts took over. Instead of fighting against whatever was pulling me, I decided to swim with it. When my head finally broke the surface, I vomited a mouthful of salt water and gasped for air. But before I could catch my breath, I was dragged down again. This time, I felt the same chilling grip on my forearm. I imagined it might be some sea creature, maybe a giant squid, but what I saw next was far more haunting. Staring back at me was a pale boy, his lips a deep, unnatural blue, skin tinged with a ghostly hue, and his jaw slack like someone who had drowned long ago. His bony hands gripped my arms tightly, and his eyes, oh, those lifeless white eyes, seemed to pierce right through me. The strangest part was watching him swim backwards, pulling me along as if he were guiding me to the depths. His legs moved slowly, almost painfully, kicking in the wrong direction. Panic surged through me, and with all my might, I pushed off his chest and broke free. The last image burned into my mind was that toothless grin spreading across his face as he sank into the dark abyss, a chilling lullaby echoing around me like some eerie, demonic song. When I finally resurfaced and took in deep, gasping breaths, I realized I was only about 100 yards from shore. I swam with every ounce of strength I had, despite the exhaustion dragging at me. Then, my feet found the sandbar, and I collapsed, waves crashing violently around me, thunder growling overhead. I told my parents what happened: the boy, the grip, the terrifying pull beneath the waves. My dad, ever the skeptic, said, "Sometimes, in moments of extreme stress, your mind plays tricks on you." But the next morning, when I showed him the marks, deep, finger-shaped bruises on my wrists and ankles, his face revealed a fear he couldn't hide. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, those lost to the sea weren't always victims of natural forces. Maybe there's something else beneath those waves, watching, waiting, and they just can't tell us about it. You know, back when I was stationed in Afghanistan, I had one of those moments that sticks with you forever, the kind you never want to relive. I was Corporal Davis, and we were moving through some rugged mountains. One night, I made a terrible mistake. I thought I saw a hostile group, but it turned out they were just a wandering family, harmless really. I fired, and the guilt hit me like a freight train. We set up camp in a cave to rest, the kind of place where the silence feels heavier than the mountain air. In the dead of night, I woke up to this strange sensation, a light tickling on my face, and this whisper, almost like a breath, saying, "Devolve." It's Arabic for devolve. I swatted at my face, thinking maybe it was a bug, but when I turned on my flashlight, I saw this huge lizard dart away into the shadows. Then, just at the cave's mouth, a shadow moved. I grabbed my rifle, heart pounding, only to find Specialist Higgins standing guard in the trench. I asked if he had just walked by the cave, but he swore he hadn't left his post all night. Little did I know, that night was the last I'd spend in Afghanistan for a while. The next morning, right after the shooting, I got a text from my wife that felt like a punch to the gut. "Something's happening to our daughter. Call me ASAP." I scrambled to get home, but the flight was slow and I was desperate. When I finally arrived, I was met with a nightmare. My daughter Callie looked like a ghost, pale, frail, with a rash spreading across her torso. I begged for the plane to move faster, but no luck. I was helpless. When I walked into the house, my heart sank even further. Callie was nowhere to be found, and my wife was sobbing in my arms. I asked what happened, if she'd been to the doctor, but my wife couldn't speak. She just pointed toward the dining room. There, sitting on the table, was a cage with a pale iguana perched inside. I lost it, shouting, "What kind of sick joke is this?" Then, the lizard opened its mouth and said, "It's me, Daddy." I broke down, thinking I was losing my mind. But I wasn't hallucinating. The next day, we had to put that iguana into a sanitized jar, and the day after, ashes scattered in an ashtray. Last night I was bathing my other daughter, Clara. She kept scratching under her arms, and when I lifted them, the rash was worse than before, and her ribs were sticking out. Then, she looked at me and said something that chilled me to the core. Dad, what does devolve mean? I keep hearing it in my sleep. It's like the nightmare is far from over, and I'm just waiting for the next chapter to unfold. Hey there, I want to share a story that's been on my mind lately about an extraordinary expedition deep in the rainforests of Sri Lanka. So, picture this. It's right after the northeast monsoon season, and COVID-19 is at its peak there. Our team, working with National Geographic, set out to investigate some unusual creatures the locals call fire spreaders. These aren't your everyday spiders. They're a kind of wandering spider, but with some truly terrifying twists. These spiders aren't just creepy, they're deadly. They roam the forest at night and hide high up in the trees by day. They travel from village to village, hunting mammals and reptiles, draining their blood and consuming the remains. On our first night, we stumbled upon a family of wild boars completely paralyzed, being eaten alive by these massive red spiders. Now, here's the weird part. When we shone our flashlights on them, instead of scattering like normal spiders, they actually moved toward the light and went on the attack. They can jump incredible distances, up to 4 feet high and 11 feet across, which makes them incredibly dangerous. Color-wise, these spiders are masters of disguise. Their fur changes with the seasons, a dark velvet red in spring, bright orange in summer, and jet black during the rainy, cooler months. It's almost impossible to spot them. And where exactly they came from? That's still a mystery. One night, while our team was camping in Adirondacks, we were suddenly woken by piercing screams. A man, woman, and toddler from a nearby village were attacked. They ran out of their hut, tearing at their own clothes and skin, screaming in agony before jumping into a raging river, where, tragically, they were swept away. This was the first time anyone outside the local tribes had witnessed the horrifying effects of a bite from these spiders. Sadly, one of our own scientists was bitten too. His reaction was chilling. He screamed that he felt like he was burning alive from the inside, claimed he could see smoke pouring from his mouth and lungs, and that his flesh was melting. We managed to restrain him just before his heart gave out, but he vomited a terrifying amount of blood before he passed away. We brought back a few of these aggressive spiders to the States for study and set up hidden cameras and audio devices across hundreds of miles in the jungle to monitor them. Night after night, the forest echoed with chilling shrieks from both humans and other creatures. These spiders are not just carnivores, they're cannibals too. When confined together, they attack and kill each other. None survive. Scientists describe their behavior as pure fury, something never seen before in arachnids. Here's the twist. A few months ago, in a quarantined village suffering from COVID, 9 people were bitten by these spiders, 3 men and 6 women. Remarkably, their COVID symptoms vanished within hours. But the catch? They became violently psychotic, crawling on all fours, attacking hospital staff and other patients, biting and tearing flesh. The virus and venom seemed to mutate together, creating something terrifyingly infectious and aggressive. The hospital was quickly overrun. Sri Lankan forces had to intervene, tragically executing many infected individuals, but some disappeared into deep caves and haven't been found since. Recently, the CDC conducted a case study on a 72-year-old woman who was given a controlled dose of the pathogen and venom. Her reaction was extraordinary and terrifying. Though legally blind, she suddenly gained eagle-like vision and claimed she could smell roses from over 1,000 feet away, despite multiple walls and thick concrete between her and an actual rose garden. Her heart rate skyrocketed, and despite extreme sedation, she violently attacked staff, causing severe injuries. Now she's in an induced coma, and doctors are struggling to find a way to reverse the effects of this venom-pathogen combination. It's unclear if she will ever recover. Confidential reports suggest that this new mutation, called SRI-91, has already overrun an entire community in Sri Lanka. Evacuation plans are reportedly underway, but the full scope of this crisis remains unknown. It's a chilling reminder of how nature can surprise us and how much we still have to learn about the world's hidden dangers. Thanks for listening. I hope you found this story as haunting and fascinating as I did. Hey, I want to share some stories with you. Real experiences that really shook me, but also taught me a lot about staying alert and strong. So, picture this. It's Christmas Eve, 2020. I'm out driving for a rideshare app, just a few hours before heading to my mom's with my wife and our new baby. Nothing fancy planned, just the usual. I get a ride request from a pretty rundown apartment complex. Nothing unusual for me. When I arrive, I meet my passenger, a guy carrying several boxes of his stuff. My car's an older Chevy Impala, so space is tight, but we manage. During the ride, he breaks down, telling me his girlfriend was cheating on him and he caught them earlier that night. He couldn't stay there because the lease was in her name, so I'm taking him to a motel in a rough part of town, known for all the vices you can imagine: drugs, gangs, shady motels. At the motel, he asks me to wait while he checks in, and sure, I do. I have a concealed, holstered gun under my seat for protection. I've had some close calls before, so I'm on edge, especially seeing homeless folks around, including one passed out with a needle still in his arm. As I help unload his stuff, I notice a guy emerge from a nearby room, followed by two women. One woman bangs on a door, opens it, and then the guy pulls out a shotgun from his coat and storms in, the women following behind. I hear shouting and get ready for the worst. Suddenly, my passenger comes up and says, "I've got this, man. You should get out of here. Merry Christmas." He even slips me some cash without me noticing. I knew those people saw me and my gun, so I had to leave fast, no witnesses. I sped off, called the cops with all the details, and signed out for the night. Later, the police couldn't find the gunman or those women, and the room's occupants denied everything. But I know what I saw. Now, another story from a few years earlier, July 4th, 2019. I was a corrections officer working nights in a maximum security prison. That day, I'd been enjoying a barbecue with my family, but I had to work, which was tough. At the prison, things were routine until just after midnight, when I heard an inmate cackling in a strange way. I checked around but found nothing. Then I noticed one inmate acting weird, talking to himself and giving me attitude. I decided to have his cell searched. When officers went to pull him out, I waited downstairs to keep things safe, but he took forever to come out, only wearing shorts and a do-rag. I called him down, but he refused, watching intently as they searched his cell. I went upstairs to check on him and saw the Samsung logo reflecting in his do-rag. I realized he had a cell phone, which was forbidden. I called for backup, and as we tried to cuff him, he suddenly pulled out a sharp metal rod disguised as a phone. He attacked me, stabbing my chest. I yelled for the other officers to spray him with bear spray, which helped subdue him. I was stabbed 4 times but survived. After that, I was forced to resign for safety reasons, and things changed. Everyone in maximum security prisons now wears vests. It's been hard, feeling abandoned by former coworkers, but I keep going. Court is coming for him, with multiple attempted murder charges. Then, there was a night driving for Lyft again, this time in a big city. I noticed a black car with super tinted windows circling the parking lot where I was parked. It passed by slowly and stopped right behind my car once. My gut said something was off, so I moved to a better spot and eventually got a ride request. I never saw that car again. I don't know what their intentions were, but it definitely raised my paranoia. Stay observant of your surroundings, friends. These experiences taught me that. Now, on a different note, I want to share a story about a shadowy encounter in my teens. I was living with my dad in an apartment with a simple layout. One day, as I was heading to my room carrying some stuff, I suddenly felt this overwhelming dread. I looked up and saw a towering, inky black silhouette, a shadow person, with no eyes, just a dark outline of a man reaching the ceiling. I dropped everything in shock. I quickly turned on the hallway light, and he vanished. I don't know if he was there to protect me or something else, but I haven't seen him since. It was unforgettable. And lastly, a little creepiness from my retail job. I work at a big store, helping with online grocery pickup. There's this regular customer, Tom, who always wears a stained old mask and drives a blue car. Every time I load his groceries, I gag slightly because the trunk reeks of bleach, trying to cover up the smell of dirty laundry and something worse. Tom is friendly, but a bit socially awkward, often confusing me with other coworkers. He calls me beautiful and nice, which is polite but also a bit unsettling given the state of his vehicle. I keep my distance and stay professional. These stories might sound all over the place, but they all taught me about caution, resilience, and the weirdness life sometimes throws at us. I hope sharing them helps you feel less alone in your own fears and reminds you to stay safe and trust your instincts. Thanks for listening. Hey, I want to share a story from when I was in Northern Ireland, back in 2017. It was part of a college field trip for my religious studies class. We were exploring stone circles across Northern Ireland and Ireland, diving into the fascinating world of religious geography. One day, we visited the Begmore stone circles on a typical cloudy day. We were all really into learning about this Bronze Age marvel, and, honestly, some of us were just excited to get back to the hotel and start a night of pub hopping. Now, the stone circles were separated from a nearby forest by a small wire fence. For some reason, we found ourselves lingering around that fence, peering into the woods just about 20 yards away. Up until then, we hadn't ventured into any forests during the trip. We mostly stuck to sites surrounded by farmland. But there was this pull, this curiosity, and I really wanted to see what was inside that old woodland. Everyone seemed to feel it too. I decided to climb over the small wire fence to explore a bit. These woods were unlike any I'd seen back in North America. The branches were thick, so thick you couldn't really stand upright inside. I had to bend over to make my way through. The ground was covered with a soft, light brown moss, dotted with tree roots. I moved quickly, eyes on the ground to avoid tripping. I felt this giddy excitement, like a kid sneaking somewhere they're not supposed to be. I picked up speed, feeling light on my feet. Then, I looked up to make sure I wouldn't run into a tree trunk, and that's when I saw it. Legs. Human legs, just standing there among the trees. I could only see the legs, the thick branches hid everything else. It was so strange. How could someone be standing in such dense woods like that? I felt this instinctual fear, almost animal-like, even though it didn't make much sense. I told myself they couldn't see me since I couldn't see their face, but somehow it felt like they knew I was there. Why would anyone be out here alone? We were the only group at the stone circles, and there were no houses nearby. I looked back and realized I'd gone much deeper into the woods than I thought. The light from the entrance was barely visible. It was so quiet. They must have heard me coming. My mind raced. I'm closer to them than to the exit. They could reach me before I get out. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably less than a minute. I didn't see the legs move, but I could tell they were facing me, not away. Suddenly, that thrill of being somewhere forbidden faded, replaced by a heavy nausea. Like a deer sensing a hunter, I turned and ran. I sprinted through the trees, still bent over, dodging branches as fast as I could. I didn't look down this time and stumbled a bit, just focused on the light at the edge of the forest. Branches grabbed at my hair and clothes, and I couldn't hear anything but my own heavy breathing. When I finally burst through the tree line, that weight lifted off me. The group by the fence looked shocked to see me come flying out like that. I told them I thought I saw someone, or something, but it almost felt wrong to say it out loud. We left soon after that. To this day, I'm not sure what I saw. Was it just a person hiding deep in the forest? Or something else? A fae? A spirit? Maybe even the Green Man? All I know is that it felt otherworldly. Anyway, thought I'd share this little mystery with you. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone! Hey, I want to share with you a story from a few years back, Thanksgiving of 2020, that started off pretty great, but quickly turned into something scary and unsettling. So, I'm a 31-year-old nursing student, and that year, I had just passed an exam with a pretty good score, around 88%. I spent the evening before Thanksgiving with my boyfriend Jame and his family. He was about to leave for a Cal Fire base, so it felt like a special time. Then, on Thanksgiving Day itself, I was with my brother's family. I left early in the morning around 8 a.m., feeling wiped out but also kind of restless. My mind was racing. I wanted to surprise my sister and her kids with a gift. When she didn't respond to my messages, my anxious energy kicked in, and in a bit of a manic mood, I decided to just go to her house unannounced. Thanksgiving was lively. Lots of food, booze, dancing, all the good stuff. Around 6 p.m., I started planning my trip to Jamie's temporary place. We got into a little spat because I told him I wanted to leave around 1 a.m. for the 3-hour drive. He was worried about driving so late in the dark through rural areas, but I insisted, telling him, "Hey, I'm an adult. I can handle it." Looking back, maybe not the best choice. We eventually agreed on my arrival time. The evening at my sister's went on with family photos, more food and drinks, and by 11 p.m., I was ready for a nap. But then, my restless mind kicked in again, and I ended up taking a shower instead. I needed help with the shower controls and fixing my hair, so I finally laid down around midnight. I planned to sleep until 1 a.m., but I overslept until 3:30 a.m. when my sister woke me up, asking why I hadn't left yet. Panicked, I rushed out the door, forgetting my phone. Had to go back for it, then set off again. Here's where things got weird. I accidentally took the wrong route because I confused 2 towns with similar names. Once I realized, I corrected my GPS and kept driving. The first hour was frustrating. I thought I lost my vape pens, but turns out my sister meant regular pens, and I found my vapes in my purse days later. Classic me. Anyway, as I left the city limits, I found myself in a strange little race with a shiny, lifted Silverado truck. I don't know why, but I got competitive and pushed my SUV up to 120 miles per hour for about 10 minutes before deciding it wasn't worth a speeding ticket. After he took an exit, it was just me and another Ford on this dark, rural road. The Ford started driving really close to me, sometimes almost swiping my car. It was a narrow 2-lane road, so it felt unsettling. When we hit a small town with stoplights, I thought, okay, maybe this guy will turn off soon. But after 2 lights, he didn't. Then, as I passed a green light, I noticed the same car turning onto the street and falling in right beside me again. My heart started pounding, and I tried to stay calm, telling myself maybe I was just imagining things. At one light, I could see the driver, a man wearing a hat, staring at me. The light turned green, but I stayed put, hoping he would go. He didn't. I slowly drove through the intersection while he kept pace with me. Then a truck behind me honked, and I took that as a sign to speed up. The Ford followed, trying to cut me off, weaving dangerously close, even oncoming traffic lanes. I was terrified, but managed to speed up to 90 miles per hour, then 120 miles per hour, trying to lose him. He was erratic, dangerously cutting off a big rig truck behind me. After about 10 minutes, I finally slowed down in a town and stopped at a busy store to catch my breath. Inside, everyone gave me these odd, pitying looks. I was shaking, tears streaked my makeup, and I struggled to pay for coffee and cigarettes because my hands were trembling. I just wanted to calm down. When I got back to Jame's place, he immediately saw something was wrong. After I told him everything, he hugged me and made sure I stayed put until he was off work. It was a tough few days. I couldn't focus on studying, still shaky and haunted by the drive. Looking back, I wish I had listened to Jame. No matter how grown up you feel, driving alone at night in remote areas can be dangerous. There are people out there you just don't want to cross paths with. So yeah, that's my Thanksgiving story. A reminder that sometimes it's okay to listen when someone says, "Maybe don't drive tonight." Hey, I want to share something that happened to me about a decade ago. It's still hard to wrap my head around how lucky I was to get away. Back then, I was 16, and, like most teenagers, often running late for school. One morning, as I was walking to the bus stop in my neighborhood, I noticed this dark green car with tinted windows slowly following me. Now, this was a quiet residential area, and cars often drove slowly, so at first, I didn't think much of it. It was around 9 a.m., a weekday, so I just figured everything was normal and kept hurrying toward the bus stop. When I got there, it had started raining, so I stepped into the small glass bus shelter to wait for the bus. Suddenly, that creepy green car pulled up right in front of the shelter. The driver got out and came over to me. The shelter was tiny, only enough room for 2 people, and he stood blocking the entrance, grabbing each side of the shelter so I couldn't get out. He was huge, really intimidating, and his eyes were cold, like there was no life in them. It sent a chill right through me. He asked if I knew the area well, and I said yes. Then he asked if I was headed to school, and again I said yes. Then he offered to drive me to school so I could show him the way. Something deep inside me screamed, "No, don't get in that car." So I politely declined and asked if he needed help with directions instead. That's when he suddenly lunged at me, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward his car. I started screaming, telling him no, but he kept saying it would be faster if I just got in. And then, just in the nick of time, the bus arrived. My instincts took over. I scratched his face, kicked, bit, and twisted until he finally let go. I jumped on the bus like my life depended on it, which, honestly, it did. The bus driver asked if I was okay, but I just nodded silently, finding a seat at the back and crying quietly as the bus took me to school. I didn't say a word about what happened all day. When I got home, I told my parents everything. They were, understandably, horrified, especially when they saw the bruise on my arm from where he grabbed me. We called the police, and an officer came that evening to take my statement. He told us there had been similar cases in the area and asked if I could come to the station to look at some photos to see if I could identify the man. The following week, my mom and I went to the station. We sat at a computer, scrolling through mugshots. So many faces, and it was overwhelming to see just how many offenders were out there. Just when I was about to give up, I recognized those dead eyes in one of the pictures. The officer asked if I was sure, and I told him yes, though the man had grown a beard since the photo. They thanked me and said they'd be in touch. 2 weeks later, The news reported that the police had caught the man suspected of kidnapping and assaulting young girls in our area. They showed his mugshot, and it was the same guy I'd identified. He was caught with one of his victims in his car. It took me years to fully grasp how close I came to something terrible. What if the bus had been late? What if I hadn't fought back? What if I hadn't noticed him following me? There were so many moments where things could have gone very differently. I feel incredibly fortunate, and I share this story because I hope it reminds you to trust your instincts and to fight for your safety, no matter what. Hey, I want to share a story with you. One that changed how I feel about camping forever and deepened the bond I have with my dog, who's pretty much a hero to me. So, a little background first. Where I live, there aren't strict trespassing laws as long as you're respectful and don't damage anything. You can walk or camp on beaches freely, just as long as you leave everything exactly as you found it. When I was a kid, camping was this big family thing. We'd go several times a year with my parents and their friends, usually about 10 people, kids included. We'd head to this super remote beach on the coast. It wasn't just us there. Other families came too, with their boats and tents. It was this really chill, family-friendly spot. Even had some basic toilets and showers, which was a lifesaver in the middle of nowhere. Now, fast forward to spring of 2012. I know this because I got my dog Mozzarella the winter before, as a birthday present to myself. I picked her from the shelter. She was 6 months old then, rescued from a terrible dog-fighting ring. We think she's a mix, maybe a lurcher and staffy. She's calm and sweet with people and other dogs, but don't mess with her. She's fiercely protective. This camping trip was different. None of the family friends could come, so it was just me, my sister, and our parents. I didn't mind. I was more attached to Mozzarella anyway. We left late. The drive took around 6 hours, and we got there just as the sun was setting. Normally, there'd be other campers and campfires lighting up the beach, but this time, it was completely empty. We started setting up in the dark. Not ideal. My parents were trying to pitch the tent while my sister and I fetched bags from the car. I rolled down Mozzarella's window to give her some fresh air because it was still warm. As we were fumbling around, my mom noticed a car driving around the circular road that loops the beach. She mentioned it to my dad, but he brushed it off. Then, a guy got out of the car and walked toward us. It was clear he wasn't sober. He was staggering, and he had a big knife in his hand. My dad stood up, holding a camping mallet, and put us behind him. The man started shouting that we couldn't camp there and to leave immediately. My dad tried to stay calm, but the guy kept moving closer, shouting louder. My sister and I were terrified, crying and shaking. I honestly thought the guy might hurt us, and I wasn't confident my dad could stop him. But then, out of nowhere, Mozzarella sprang into action. She lunged at the man, biting his arm hard, tearing through his jacket and breaking the skin. He dropped the knife, kicked and punched her to get free, grabbed the knife again, and ran back to his car before speeding off. Mozzarella stayed with us, even though she was bleeding a little. We quickly packed up and got back in the car, shaken but safe. I checked her over. She was okay, just a bit scratched. Somehow, during the chaos, she must have pushed her paw against the window and squeezed out of the car when it was slightly open. We decided to head home right away, but we needed gas. When we pulled into the nearest town's petrol station, we saw the guy waiting there, cleaning his wound. We didn't stop. My dad drove out immediately. Then, as we drove toward the next town, which was about 60 miles away, the guy started following us in his car. That hour-long chase was one of the scariest moments of my life. Our gas was nearly empty, and we were driving on fumes the entire time. But finally, he turned off, and we made it safely to the next town to refuel. After we got home and rested, my mom reported the incident to the police. They never followed up, but apparently, the guy matched the description of someone wanted for a serious crime. We don't know what became of him. So, what's the takeaway? For me, it's that Mozzarella isn't just a pet. She's family and a true protector. Despite everything she went through before I adopted her, abuse, fear, neglect, she had the courage to defend us without hesitation. I believe dogs can truly sense danger and understand human emotions better than we give them credit for. If you're thinking about getting a dog, please consider adopting. They'll change your life in ways you never expect. Mozzarella saved mine. And that $80 adoption fee? The best investment I ever made. I've never told this story anywhere before, but every time I think about it, it still gives me that strange, cold feeling in my chest. It happened a few years ago when my father and his wife, Marla, took a trip to Rome with a small group of friends. I think there were 3 other couples with them, maybe 4. They rented this old historic villa just outside the busiest part of the city. Beautiful place, from what they told me. Stone walls, high ceilings, antique furniture, the kind of house that looks romantic in pictures but feels a little too quiet once the sun goes down. Now, before I get into what happened, I should probably say this. Marla and I didn't always have the easiest relationship. When I was younger, I honestly couldn't stand her. I always felt like she was watching me too closely, criticizing me, waiting for me to mess up. Maybe I was just a sensitive kid reading too much into things. Or maybe I was right. I don't really know anymore. These days, we're fine. Not exactly close, but peaceful. And I'm saying that because I want you to understand something. Even with all that history between us, I believe her completely. Marla is not someone who makes things up. She doesn't exaggerate for attention. She's not theatrical. Some people can tell you a wild story and, even if you love them, part of you thinks, yeah, that probably didn't happen that way. She is not one of those people. She barely has the patience for fiction. So they were all staying in different rooms throughout this old villa. My dad and Marla were on the 2nd floor, in a room with a tall window facing the outside of the house. Sometime around 3 in the morning, my dad woke up to the sound of Marla screaming right next to him. And I don't mean a startled scream. I mean the kind of scream that sounds like something has reached inside a person and pulled the terror straight out of them. The kind of scream that makes your body react before your mind even understands what's happening. It was so loud that everyone in the house woke up. Within seconds, the other couples came running down the hall and burst into the bedroom. A few of the men immediately went straight for my dad, asking what he had done to her. He was standing there in the dark, half awake, hands raised, completely stunned, saying, "Nothing. I didn't do anything. I just woke up too." Marla couldn't speak at first. She was sobbing, shaking, trying to breathe. When she finally got enough air in her lungs, she told them what she saw. She said she had opened her eyes and looked toward the window. And standing right outside the glass, staring directly into the room, was an old man with a thick beard. The thing is, they were on the 2nd floor. There was no balcony outside that window, no terrace, no ledge, nothing someone could stand on. Just the outside wall of the house and a drop straight down to the stone courtyard below. That moment ruined the rest of the trip for her. For the next couple of days, Marla was terrified in a way my dad said he had never seen before. She wouldn't be alone in any room. She wouldn't even shower unless he sat in the bathroom with her. The whole place felt wrong after that, like the house had turned its attention toward them. Eventually, they couldn't take it anymore. They packed up early and paid for rooms somewhere else, just to get out of that villa. On their final evening there, while everyone was gathering bags and checking the common rooms to make sure nothing had been left behind, Marla suddenly stopped. She was staring at the wall. There was an old framed photograph hanging there, faded and yellowed with age. It looked like it had been taken sometime in the late 1800s. In the picture was an elderly man with a heavy beard, sitting stiffly for the camera, holding a pipe. Marla went pale. Then she lifted her hand, pointed at the photograph, and said, very quietly, "That's him. That's the man I saw outside our window." I was sitting in a parked car with a few friends one night, and we were just talking, passing time, telling ghost stories like people do when they're trying to scare each other a little. At first, it was all fun. Nothing serious. Just that kind of late-night conversation where everyone starts leaning into the spooky mood. Then one of my friends, Mara, suddenly pointed at the driver's side window and said there was a handprint on it. Everyone got quiet for a second, because of course we were literally in the middle of talking about ghosts. But I didn't really react much. The print was on the outside of the car, and honestly, that didn't seem that strange to me. Someone could have walked by earlier and leaned on the glass. It happens. But then my friend sitting next to me in the back noticed another handprint on our window. And this one felt different. The fingers were angled in this really unnatural way, pointing down toward the bottom left corner of the glass. It wasn't the way you'd normally rest your hand. So we tried wiping it off, and that's when we realized the print wasn't outside. It was on the inside of the window. That was the first moment where I didn't really have a neat little explanation ready. We all tried to recreate the position of the hand just to see if one of us could have done it without thinking, but it was awkward. You had to twist your arm in a weird way to make it match. After that, we decided to leave and grab food somewhere, but the car we were in was low on gas. So we all moved into my car instead. By then, everyone was talking about the handprints, so before we drove off, we checked my car too. That's when we saw 7 fingertip marks pressed against the outside of the rear left window. Not a full handprint, just 7 fingertips. I remember thinking that was strange, but I still wasn't ready to call it anything supernatural. Weird, sure. Creepy, definitely. But I was trying to stay reasonable about it. While I was driving, we kept talking about it. At one point, I specifically noticed that my driver's side window was completely clean. No smudges, no prints, nothing. When we got to the restaurant, I parked really close to another car, so I asked my friend Eli to open my door from the outside so I wouldn't accidentally bump or scratch the car beside us. Before he opened it, he even said, "I'm only touching the door." And he did. I watched him. When I got out, I was careful too. I didn't touch the window at all. I closed the door by the frame, and we started walking toward the restaurant. But something made me turn back. I don't even know why. I just wanted to check the windows again. And on my driver's side window, the same window that had been completely clean, there were 4 fingerprints sliding downward through the glass, like someone had dragged their fingers down it. The 7 fingertip marks on the other window were still there. They hadn't changed. But these new prints were on the window that nobody had touched. I know most people hearing this are probably going to think my friends were messing with me. And honestly, I get that. If someone told me this story, I'd probably think the same thing. But the thing is, they were more scared than I was for most of the night. They believe in supernatural stuff. I really don't. Or at least, I didn't. Lately, though, I've been second-guessing that, because strange things have been happening around me for the past few weeks. Out of all of it, this incident still bothers me the most, because it wasn't just me. 3 other people were there. They saw the same things I saw. I can almost convince myself that the first prints were probably human somehow. Maybe there's an explanation for the weird angle. Maybe there's an explanation for the 7 fingertips. But that last one? I have nothing. Both Eli and I were paying attention to what we touched. We were careful. We both knew that window had been clean. And between the moment I saw it clean and the moment I came back to check it, nobody touched it. I wish I had taken pictures. I even mentioned it when I saw the last set of prints, but for some reason none of us actually pulled out a phone. I still don't understand why. All I know is that something happened that night, and I still can't explain it. I was a freshman in high school back in 2015, and a few nights a week, I would stay at my older sister's townhouse to watch her dogs while she worked overnight. She had 2 big pit bulls, but honestly, the job was simple. I fed them, played with them for a while, let them outside, and then put them in their kennels before bed so they wouldn't chew up the furniture while everyone was asleep. My sister usually worked until about 4 in the morning, so most nights I would just sleep there. My girlfriend at the time, Kayla, would sometimes come with me, and it usually felt pretty normal. Almost boring, really. That night started the same way. After school, we went over to my sister's place, took care of the dogs, watched some TV, played a few games, and just relaxed. Nothing felt strange. Nothing felt off. Around 10:30, we headed upstairs to my sister's bedroom to get ready for bed. The bedroom door was closed because she always kept it shut to stop the cats from getting in. Kayla and I were sitting on the bed, both on our phones, not really talking much. Then, all at once, the bedroom door started shaking. And I don't mean a little rattle. It was violent, loud, like someone was standing on the other side, grabbing the handle and trying as hard as they could to force their way in. The door wasn't even locked, but in that moment, neither of us thought about that. We just reacted. We jumped off the bed and threw ourselves against the door, pressing our legs and shoulders into it, because we truly believed someone had broken into the house and was trying to get into the room. I remember my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was in my throat. Then the shaking stopped. Just like that. For a few seconds, we didn't move. We just stood there against the door, listening. I grabbed my sister's boyfriend's gun from the closet, locked the bedroom door, and pushed a dresser in front of it. Then I looked out the window and saw that the little patio gate downstairs was wide open. That scared me even more, because my first thought was, someone came in through there. After a few minutes, I worked up the courage to check the house. I went room by room upstairs first, then slowly made my way downstairs. But there was nothing. The front door was locked. The alarm system was still armed, and it absolutely would have gone off if someone had opened a door or window. The dogs were calm in their kennels, which made no sense to me. If anyone had actually come inside, those dogs would have lost their minds barking. One of them could even break out of the kennel if she really wanted to. Everything looked completely normal. That was the worst part. There was no sign that anything had happened, except for the fact that both of us had seen and heard that door shaking like someone was trying to get in. My sister has always been very involved in spiritual things. She reads tarot, believes in spirits, and used to go to graveyards at night with one of her close friends. He said he could hear spirits, and she said she could sometimes see them. There was also this old standing mirror from our childhood home. My sister believed it was connected to a shadow figure I used to see when I was younger. That went on for almost 2 years, until she cleansed me and the house. After that, the experiences stopped. I honestly can't remember if that mirror was in the townhouse when this happened, but if it was, I already know my sister would say that was the reason. Maybe it was a person. Maybe there's some normal explanation I'll never figure out. Or maybe it was something else. I still don't know. All I know is that Kayla and I never forgot that night, and I don't think I've ever been that scared in my life. I share stories like this because sometimes the right words arrive exactly when someone needs them. And maybe someone hearing this right now is in a difficult place and needs the same reminder that came through for her. A woman came in for a deep session. I'll call her Alina, though that is not her real name. As she settled into trance, she moved into another lifetime. She saw herself as a medicine woman living near a wide, wild sea. She was gathering herbs and roots with her grandmother, learning the old ways of healing, tending to people, loving her family, and growing older inside a life that felt simple, sacred, and full. I'll only share the part that stayed with me most. Near the end of that life, she was lying in a narrow bed inside a small stone village. Her family was gathered close. One of the women caring for her, gently washing her hands and praying beside her, was her daughter in this life. But in that lifetime, she had been her younger sister. And Alina said she wasn't afraid. She wasn't grieving. She was deeply peaceful. She said, "I stayed for my family. Now that I am old, I am happy to go. They think this is the end, but it is not. It is only the end of this part." After she left the body, she saw a bright sphere of light filled with every sound at once. Laughter, crying, celebration, sorrow, waves, voices, silence. All of it was there together. Then an elder from her village appeared. She was another medicine woman, someone who had spent her younger years studying the ocean, the moon, the animals, and the shifting nature of spirit. She told Alina, "This is how the soul comes to know itself. Nothing stays the same forever, but everything matters. Every experience has a place. Every person must move through what teaches them." Then her higher self appeared. It looked like a great violet crystal made of living energy, glowing from within. Alina moved into it, and the feeling changed completely. She said it was peaceful, joyful, weightless. There was no heaviness there, no pressure, no fear. Then her higher self began to speak. It said, "This session was arranged so she could remember. Remember not to hold life so tightly. Remember that everything has meaning. Remember that problems can be looked at from another place." It said, "She believes she is stuck. She keeps searching outside herself for help, but everything she needs is already within her. Everything is available inside." Then it gave her something very simple. It said, "The meditation of sinking back into the sea, becoming very quiet, feeling the water around her, is a doorway. Water softens the noise. It reminds her where she truly is. She does not need to carry every sound that belongs to someone else." Then it spoke about boundaries. It said, "She already understands what boundaries are. She does not need more theory. She needs more pauses. When overwhelm begins, that is the sign to step away, not to push harder. She identifies too strongly with the noise around her. Step away. Return to peace. Then she will remember what she already knows." It also said, "She needs more time in nature with no purpose. Not walking to finish a goal. Not going outside as another task. Just being there. Watching life. Watching the trees, the water, the sky. The small movements of Mother Nature. No time limit. No pressure. No list. Just presence. She needs this." Then Alina asked what she had come here to learn. And her higher self said, "You came to learn how to hold all of it. How to be all of yourself within the structure of this life. How to bring your full light into the physical world. That is why you are here." It said, "Bring the light into your problems. Bring the light into your frustrations. Bring the light into the places that feel tight and impossible. You are standing at a new frontier. Everything is okay. Every choice can serve you, as long as you bring the light in." That stayed with me, because so many of us look outward when we feel lost. We look for the answer, the sign, the person, the perfect instruction. But what came through was so clear. The quiet is already there. The water is already there. The place inside that remembers is already there. Sometimes the answer is not found by pushing harder. Sometimes it comes when we step away, soften the noise, and return to the part of us that was never truly lost. I was only about 5 years old when this happened, more than 30 years ago now, but I still remember it clearly. And it was not just something I dreamed up. Other people who were there have confirmed it many times over the years. I grew up in a small village in eastern Turkey where almost every family kept cows. Back then, the routine was simple. Early in the morning, people would open their barn doors and the cows would walk out together toward the meadows. The shepherd would guide them and keep watch over them during the day. Then, in the evening, just before sunset, the cows would come back on their own. Each one knew exactly which barn to return to. The owners would be waiting to milk them. But every now and then, one cow would not come back on time. Usually, it was nothing dramatic. A cow would wander off, stop somewhere, get distracted doing whatever cows do, and forget to follow the others home. When that happened, the owner would go looking, sometimes with a neighbor or someone from the family. One evening, our cow did not return. My mother asked me and my Aunt Lena to go look for her. Lena was around 14 at the time, so I followed her. As we walked, we noticed other villagers were out searching too. More and more people joined, because that evening it was not just one missing cow. Several cows had not come back. Before long, there were maybe 20 or 30 of us walking together, adults and children. Some of the kids joined just because it felt like an adventure. A few miles from the village, there was a rocky hill with patches of grass. That was where the cows had been grazing earlier that day, so everyone headed in that direction. As we got closer, we saw smoke rising from the hill. At first, people thought there might have been a fire. A few older boys ran back toward the village to call for help, just in case. But as we kept walking, the smoke looked strange. It was not spread out like a normal fire. It was narrow and dark, rising straight up, almost like it was coming out of a chimney. Then we started hearing something. At first, it sounded like drumming. Then it became more like voices, rhythm, movement. The closer we got, the more it sounded like some kind of celebration. That was when the older women became very serious. The grandmothers began pushing people back, telling everyone, "Go home, go home. It is nothing, do not look." But Lena was curious. She slipped past them and ran toward the hill. I was little, and I did not want to be left behind, so I ran after her. When we reached the edge of the hill, we saw it. There was a huge fire, tall and narrow, burning upward but somehow contained. Around it, there was a circle of figures moving together. They looked like dark, tall shadows, linked in a chain, dancing around the flames. Even with the fire lighting everything, we could not see faces or clothes, only those long black shapes turning around and around in the glow. The moment we saw them, we knew we had made a terrible mistake. Lena grabbed me, or maybe I grabbed her. I cannot remember clearly. We just ran. The others had seen enough too, especially the grandmothers. Everyone hurried back toward the village, and that night nobody cared about the cows anymore. We left them outside until morning. Later, the elders told us we had seen a jinn wedding. Even now, after all these years, I still cannot explain it away. That hill was far from the village. Nobody lived there then, and nobody lives there now. If it had been a normal wedding from another village, we would have known. We would have recognized the people, or at least understood the songs and voices from a distance. But this was different. I do believe jinn exist. Still, believing in them is one thing. Seeing something like that with your own eyes is something else entirely. I didn't notice her in my grandfather's funeral photo until after my mother was buried. That's the part that still makes my hands go cold. It was late, maybe a little after midnight, and I was sitting alone at my kitchen table with an old photo album open in front of me. The tea beside me had gone completely cold. The house was quiet in that awful way a house gets after a funeral, when every small sound feels too loud and every room seems to remember someone who isn't there anymore. My mother's funeral had been that afternoon at St. Andrew's. There were maybe 50 people there, family, old neighbors, a few friends from work. I remember the sky outside the church windows looked gray and flat, like wet cement. For most of the service, I was barely present. I stood when I was supposed to stand, sat when I was supposed to sit, nodded when people touched my arm and said kind things. Grief does that to you sometimes. It doesn't break you loudly. It just turns you into someone who can move through the day without really being inside it. Then, during the eulogy, I saw her. She was sitting in the very last pew, close to the side wall, with a whole empty row between her and everyone else. At first, I couldn't explain why she caught my attention. She was just wrong for the room. Not frightening exactly, not at first, but wrong in the way a mirror can feel wrong when something in the reflection doesn't match what's behind you. She had a pale face, not sickly pale, but faded, like color had never properly settled on her. Her dress was black, high at the neck, heavy-looking, and old-fashioned in a way that didn't feel intentional. It wasn't vintage. It wasn't elegant. It looked like it belonged to a time that had shut its doors long ago. And she wasn't looking at my mother's casket. She wasn't looking at the priest. She was looking straight at me. I looked away because I didn't know what else to do. Then I looked back. She hadn't moved, not even a little. No shifting in the seat, no glance down at a program, no small, restless movement that people make without thinking. She just sat there, fixed and silent, watching me. I watched her on and off for the rest of the service. I swear to you, I never saw her blink. Afterward, I asked my Aunt Carrie who the woman in the back was. She frowned and said, "What woman?" I asked my cousin Devin, then my mother's friend Patricia, then even the priest while he was gathering his notes. Nobody had seen her, not one person. They didn't say they didn't recognize her. They didn't say she left early. They said there had been no woman sitting in the back pew. So I went home and told myself the only thing that made sense. I was exhausted. I was grieving. My mind had filled an empty space with something because it didn't know where else to put the fear. That should have been the end of it. But later that night, I found myself standing in the hallway closet, pulling down the old family photo albums. I don't know why. I wasn't thinking clearly. It felt less like a decision and more like something inside me had reached for them before I understood what I was doing. I took the oldest album to the kitchen table. The cover was cracked. The plastic sleeves had gone cloudy. I turned through photos I had seen my whole life. My grandparents on their wedding day. My mother as a little girl in a dress with crooked buttons. Relatives standing in yards and church steps and kitchens I didn't recognize. Then I found the photo from my grandfather's funeral. It was from 1963, black and white, taken from the front of the church, facing back toward the entrance. I had seen that picture so many times before, but I had never really looked at the last pew. She was there. Same pale face, same dark, high-collared dress, same stillness. She was sitting by the far wall, alone, just like she had been at my mother's funeral. Only in that picture, she wasn't looking at the casket either. She was looking directly into the camera. I remember pushing the chair back from the table, not standing up, just needing space between me and the photo. After a while, I made myself look again, Behind one of the cloudy sleeves, tucked slightly out of place, was another funeral photograph. Older, maybe late 1930s or early 1940s. The church was smaller, darker. Everyone in the photo had that stiff, formal posture people used to have in old pictures. I found her almost immediately. Back row, far wall, unchanged. 30 years between the two pictures, and she looked exactly the same. That was when I noticed the child near the doorway. A little boy, maybe 8 years old, half hidden by the frame. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking toward the last pew, and he was pointing at her. My mother had spent years building our family tree, so I opened her records on my laptop and started searching. I matched the funeral photo to a name. Then I found the boy. He died less than a year after that picture was taken. I wish I had stopped there. I really do. But once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. You start looking into the corners, the background, the places your eyes usually slide past because nothing important is supposed to be there. I went through every album. I found her in 5 more photographs. Different funerals, different decades, different churches. Always the same place. Last pew, far wall, alone. And every time, she was not watching the person being buried. She was watching someone still alive. I laid the photos across the kitchen table in a line. In my grandfather's funeral photo, she was looking at my grandmother, who died a few years later. In the older photo, she was looking toward the little boy, who died within the year. In the others, once I checked names and dates against my mother's notes, the pattern stayed the same. She was never watching the person who had just died. She was watching the next one. Or maybe not even the next one. The one after that. The person whose place in the line had just moved closer. I sat there for a long time, staring at those photos while the house seemed to get colder around me. Then I remembered the picture from that afternoon. My cousin Devin had taken it before the service started. He had stood near the front of the church and snapped a photo looking back across the pews. He sent it to me earlier, but I hadn't really looked at it. I opened it on my phone. Last pew, far wall. There she was. Same face, same dress, same impossible stillness. I zoomed in with my fingers trembling. I needed to see who she was watching. The image was a little blurred near the edges, but the back of the church was clear enough. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't looking at the mourners. She was looking at the camera. She was looking at Devin. I called him right away. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted him. Please call me. It's urgent. That was hours ago. I've called again and again, every 20 minutes. Same thing each time. 4 rings, his voice, then silence. His address is written on a piece of paper in front of me. My keys are beside it, and I know I should go. I know I should get up from this table and drive over there. But something in me already knows that when I arrive, whatever I find, I'll be too late, because she has never been wrong before. I've carried this story with me for most of my life, and honestly, I still don't know what to make of it. It happened a little over 40 years ago, during a summer holiday on the Adriatic coast. I think it was 1987. My family was staying at this seaside resort that belonged to the company where my father worked, so the whole place had a very friendly, familiar feeling. Everyone seemed to know someone. Families ate together, children ran around after dinner, and every evening there was some kind of entertainment for the guests. One night it might be dancing, another night a film, then maybe music, games, or a little disco for the younger crowd. But on one particular evening, the schedule changed at the last minute. Instead of the usual activity, they announced that a magician would be performing. At first, he seemed completely ordinary. He did the sort of tricks you would expect: cups, cards, coins, sponge balls, bottles. Nothing too frightening or dramatic. For us children, it was wonderful. We were leaning forward, laughing, whispering to each other, trying to catch him out. Then, right near the end of the show, something changed. His voice became different, lower, sharper, almost as if he had stopped pretending to be the cheerful entertainer we had been watching. He looked out at the audience and said something like, "That is enough of children's games for tonight. Now I will show you who I really am and what I can really do." The room went quiet. He placed a stack of small blue envelopes on the table. Just ordinary letter envelopes, nothing fancy. You couldn't see through them at all. Then he asked every adult in the room to write their name on one envelope and place their identity card inside it. He said he would read each person's full name, address, and personal identification number through the envelope. Now, the names written on the outside were supposed to be a kind of control, so everyone could see whose envelope he was holding. But he claimed he didn't actually need them. And while he performed this part, he had a folded scarf tied over his eyes. All the envelopes were placed on the table in front of him. When he began, he picked up the first one and, within seconds, read the full name, address, and number from the ID card inside. Then he did another, perfectly. People laughed at first, but it was a nervous kind of laughter. Then he kept going. One envelope after another. Every detail was right. That was strange enough, but then my father decided to test him. While everyone was writing names and putting their ID cards into the envelopes, my father quietly made an arrangement with a woman sitting on the far side of the restaurant. My father wrote his own name on his envelope, but put her ID card inside. She wrote her name on her envelope, but put my father's ID card inside. So when the magician reached the envelope with my father's name on it, he stopped. He held it up and said, almost amused, "Someone here has tried to trick me." Then he said there was a man's name written on the envelope, but inside was the identity card of a woman. He identified her correctly. And then, without searching through all the envelopes one by one, he reached for the envelope with that woman's name on it. Inside was my father's ID card. He read that one perfectly too. My father was stunned, truly stunned. He was not an easy man to impress, but that night he had no explanation. When the show ended and people began talking all at once, the magician looked directly at me. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just stared at me for maybe 10 seconds. I was only a child, but I remember that look very clearly. And even now, after all these years, I still wonder what really happened that night. Was it some brilliant trick? Was there a method none of us could see? Or was it something else entirely? I honestly don't know, but I have never forgotten it. I moved into this place last spring, and at first, I thought I'd lucked out. It sits right beside a stretch of woods, the kind that looks peaceful during the day, but turns into something else once the light starts draining out of the sky. Pretty soon after moving in, though, strange things started happening. Me, my brother Callan, and his girlfriend heard voices more than once late at night when we were out by the parking area. Not clear conversations, just low murmurs, footsteps on gravel, that kind of thing. A few times, when I was walking through the woods with friends, I heard someone call my name from behind the trees. But when we looked around, there was nobody there. No hikers, no kids, no one hiding around. Just the trees and that heavy silence afterward. Recently, we found out there's an old tree deeper in the woods. People around here call it the witch elm. It's supposed to be a couple 100 years old, maybe older. I don't know why, but once I heard about it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days ago, during that little heat wave we had, I decided to go find it by myself. I had nothing else going on, and curiosity got the better of me. To reach it, you have to go down these old steps into a lower part of the woods. The second I got near those steps, I had this horrible feeling that I was being watched. Not just nerves. It felt focused, like something had noticed me. Still, I kept going. When I finally reached the tree, I understood why people talked about it. It was huge and twisted, with these heavy branches stretching out like they were holding the air in place. Nothing dramatic happened at first, but the whole area felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. I stayed for maybe 5 minutes, then decided I'd had enough. After that, I walked farther along the path and sat on a fallen log while I waited for Callan to finish work. He said he'd come meet me and check the tree out too. While I was sitting there, talking to him on the phone, I suddenly heard this deep, aggressive growl behind me. I turned around straight away, but there was nothing there. The path runs near the back fences of some houses, so I tried to convince myself it was probably a dog in someone's garden. That was the sensible explanation, and I really wanted a sensible explanation. About 40 minutes later, Callan arrived. We went down to the witch elm together, and weirdly, everything felt fine that time. No growling, no pressure, nothing. We were waiting for his girlfriend to join us, but we ended up heading home first because we had a few errands to run. Later, around 8 p.m., we went back. The sun was setting by then, and the woods had that dim, gray-blue look where every shadow seems a little too thick. We parked and started walking toward the tree again. Halfway down the path, we heard screaming somewhere off in the woods. I know that sounds insane, but strange screaming isn't completely unusual there. Still, it put all three of us on edge. When we reached the tree, the whole atmosphere had changed. It felt awful. The same watched feeling came back, only stronger. I wanted to walk closer to the tree, but something in my head was telling me not to. Not a voice exactly, more like a hard warning. So I stayed where I was. Then Callan's girlfriend went quiet and said she'd just heard growling. We both turned to look at her while she was trying to explain where it came from. And then, something huge started charging through the long grass toward us. We couldn't see what it was, but we could hear it moving. Fast. Too fast. It didn't sound like a fox, or a deer, or a person. It sounded heavy, frantic, and directly aimed at us. So we ran. There was no discussion, no brave investigating. We just bolted back up the path. The whole way back, all three of us had the same feeling. Something was following us. Not just behind us in the woods, but keeping pace. When we finally got to Callan's car, his girlfriend got in the passenger seat, he drove, and I sat alone in the back. Except I didn't feel alone. The entire ride back, it felt like someone was sitting beside me. I kept glancing over, and of course there was nothing there. But the space next to me felt occupied. Heavy. Close. When we got back to the house and pulled over, I didn't say anything at first because I thought I'd sound ridiculous. Then Callan and his girlfriend both said they'd felt it too. They said it felt like something else had gotten into the car with us. I still don't know what followed us out of those woods that night. I don't know if it was tied to that old tree, or if we just walked into the wrong place at the wrong time. But I know what I heard, and I know what I felt. And whatever it was, it didn't feel like it wanted us there. I was just starting to drift off, probably a little after 11:30 at night. You know that late night kind of quiet, when everything feels too still, and even the smallest sound seems to stretch across the whole neighborhood? That's how it was. I had already turned the lights off, put my phone on charge, and gotten comfortable under the blanket. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a woman scream outside. At first, I honestly thought it might have been a couple arguing somewhere down the road. I stayed still and listened, hoping it would just fade away. But then she screamed again, and this time it was louder, sharper. It sounded like she was terrified, like she was hurt badly, and like she needed someone right then. She kept calling out for someone. I think it was a man's name, maybe Marlowe or something close to that, but I couldn't make it out clearly. What I do know is that it didn't sound like someone joking around. It didn't sound dramatic or fake. It sounded real in a way that made my chest go cold. For a few seconds, I just froze in bed. I couldn't tell where it was coming from because the sound was bouncing around strangely, almost like it was coming from every direction at once. Then I heard her sobbing, begging for help, and after that there were these awful choking sounds. Wet, strained sounds. I hate even describing it, but that was the moment my stomach dropped. And then it stopped. Not gradually, not like someone walked away or went quiet. It just cut off completely. I grabbed my phone and went to the window. I looked outside, but all I could see was the dark stretch near the concrete wall beside the neighboring property. That's what made it even stranger, because there isn't really anywhere for someone to be over there. Behind that wall is just a wide, empty field, and it goes on for a long way. There are a few houses far off, but nothing close enough for the screams to have sounded that clear. No cars passed. No lights came on. No doors opened. Nobody yelled back. It felt like I was the only person in the entire street who had heard it. I stood there staring into the dark, waiting for some sign of movement. Footsteps, voices, anything. But there was nothing. The silence after the screaming felt worse than the screaming itself. It had this heavy, wrong feeling, like the whole area was holding its breath. I even stepped outside for a moment, but I didn't go far. I was too scared to walk toward the wall alone. The street was completely empty, and the field was just this black shape beyond everything, sitting there like it knew something I didn't. So I texted the man who lives next door. His name is Darren, and I asked him if he had heard anything outside. He replied almost right away, confused, asking what I meant. When I told him about the woman screaming near the wall, he said that didn't make sense at all. He said there shouldn't have been anyone there, because there's literally nothing in that direction except the field. He checked from his side too. Nothing. No person. No movement. No explanation. That's when I started to feel really unsettled. I kept replaying the sound in my head. Her voice was too clear, too scared, too human. I can't just convince myself I imagined it because I know what I heard. But at the same time, none of it fits. I've lived here for years, and I've never heard anything like that before, not even close. Now I'm sitting in my room with every light on, still looking out the window every few minutes. I keep expecting to see someone standing by the wall or walking slowly through the field, but there's nothing there. Just darkness and that awful quiet. Maybe there's some normal explanation. Maybe sound carried from somewhere far away in a weird way. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But I'll be honest with you. It didn't feel normal. It felt like something terrible happened right outside my house, and then the night swallowed it whole. I've been turning something over in my mind, and I want to tell you about it honestly, because I still do not fully understand it myself. You know how people always talk about haunted houses, haunted hotels, haunted old buildings? I keep wondering whether sometimes it is not the place at all, whether a person can be the one carrying it. Not in a dramatic movie sense, not like something is living inside them, but more like certain people seem to move through life with strange things trailing close behind. The reason I ask is because of my own experiences. Ever since I was little, I've had moments that I cannot explain away. I've heard voices when no one was there, quiet murmurs and whispers that felt close enough to answer back to. I've seen people, actual human figures, not just shadows in the corner of my eye. I've watched objects end up in different places even when I had not left the room. Sometimes a strong scent will suddenly appear right beside me. Perfume, smoke, something sharp and unfamiliar, then vanish as quickly as it came. I've even had dreams that felt paranormal in nature, only to wake up and realize parts of them had somehow spilled into real life. There is a lot more, honestly. Enough that I could go on for hours. I moved around a lot growing up, and the strange things seemed to follow me from house to house. The first time I ever saw someone who was not supposed to be there was in my childhood home. I still remember how real it felt. After that, every place I lived in had its own moments. Different walls, different streets, same uneasy feeling that something odd could happen at any time. Then I moved into the house I live in now, back in 2018, and for a while it felt different, calmer. I remember thinking maybe I had finally landed somewhere untouched by all of it. Over the past couple of years, there were still a few little things I could not explain, but nothing like before. Nothing intense. But lately, that has changed. Over the last year especially, it feels like this house has slowly stirred awake. And in the past few weeks, it has become hard to ignore. The activity feels familiar now, almost like I've stepped back into an old pattern I hoped I had outgrown. I used to joke that every home I lived in must be haunted, but when you really stop and think about it, what are the chances of that? This house is not even particularly old. It was built in 2012. Some of the other places I lived were much older, so I used to comfort myself with that old haunted house stereotype. But this place does not fit that story, and still, here we are. That is what keeps pulling me back to the same question. Maybe it is not the houses. I've always loved paranormal stories, probably because they feel weirdly familiar to me. I've read so many accounts from people who say they visited a haunted place and something followed them home. I've also heard from people like my friend Mira, who believes some people are simply more open to this kind of thing, more sensitive, more receptive, whatever word you want to use. Empaths, psychics, intuitives, people who seem to pick up what others do not. So I guess that is what I'm asking you. Do you think some people are haunted in their own way? Do you think certain people carry an energy that draws strange things in? Or do you think there is another explanation entirely? Because after everything I've experienced, I still do not have an answer. I just know that wherever I go, the unexplained seems to find me eventually. A couple of weeks ago, something happened that I still can't make sense of. I live right next door to my sister, and one evening she went out with her partner for her birthday. My younger sister was looking after the kids that night. She'd picked them up, brought them back, and when she pulled into the driveway, I noticed they were all just standing outside instead of going in. So I stepped out to see what was going on. My family has always loved anything to do with space, and it was one of those really clear nights where the sky just seemed wide open. My younger sister was pointing out constellations to my niece, who's 8, and my nephew, who's 5. She was also showing them satellites moving across the sky. It was such a lovely little moment, so I stayed out there with them for a while. And just to be clear, none of them had gone into the house yet. While we were all standing there looking up, I suddenly heard a few high-pitched meows. My sister's kitten is called Milo, and I know his meow straight away. So I said to my niece, "I can hear Milo. He's not outside, is he?" He's not supposed to be out here." She looked up toward the house, paused for a second, and then pointed to the upstairs window and said, "He's in the window." And honestly, there he was, sitting right on the upstairs bedroom windowsill. Clear as day, I could see him. My niece could see him. Then my nephew came over when he realized we were all staring at something, and he pointed up too and said he could see Milo. My younger sister looked up as well, heard the meowing, and joked that he must want to come outside and look at the stars with us. So at that point, all four of us had heard the meowing, and all four of us had seen what looked exactly like Milo sitting in that upstairs window. About 20 minutes later, I went back into my house, and my sister took the kids inside theirs. Then I got a call from her. She said, "You are not going to believe this." When I came in, I could hear scratching in the kitchen. I opened the kitchen door, and Milo had been shut in there the whole time. I just went quiet, because we had all seen him upstairs. Not one of us thought we might have imagined it. It was so clear. So I asked her if maybe the kitchen door had been left open a crack and he'd gotten out, but she said no. She had to actually press the handle down to open it and let him out. So unless that kitten somehow opened the door himself, wandered upstairs, sat in the window meowing at us, and then let himself back in and shut the door behind him, there's just no normal explanation for it. And that's the part that still gets me. I'm not someone who jumps to wild conclusions. I've had strange experiences since I was a kid, and so has my younger sister, so unusual things don't really shock me anymore. My other sister, the one who lives next door, has never really been into anything paranormal, but lately, even she's been having some unsettling experiences in her house. Still, I'm a very logical person. I always try to find a reasonable explanation first. I want there to be one. Sometimes there is. But with this, I've gone over it again and again, and I still can't explain what we saw that night. It's been sitting with me ever since. I honestly don't know whether it was some kind of glitch, some bizarre misperception, or whether that cat has powers none of us are ready for. But whatever it was, all I know is this: we saw Milo in that upstairs window, and somehow, at the exact same time, he was locked in the kitchen. I've been carrying a lot lately, and I think that's where this story really starts. You know how sometimes life doesn't just hand you one hard thing? It drops a whole armful of them in your lap at once? That's kind of where I've been. A few weeks ago, my mother-in-law took a bad fall and hurt her back. Then, not long after that, a close friend of my husband and brother-in-law passed away. It's been heavy. Really heavy. So through all of that, Wyeth, who's been with me since I was about 5, and Tomas, his brother, have been doing everything they can to keep me from sinking too far into the sadness. And their preferred method, apparently, is being absolute clowns. Their favorite thing to do is make faces at people who overstay their welcome, or throw in little running commentary while we're trying to watch something. Just enough to break the tension. And just enough to make me want to laugh when I probably shouldn't. One day, my mother-in-law's sister came by to visit after the fall. Now, I don't personally have anything against her, but she clearly decided a while back that she doesn't care for me. That's her business. I'm not losing sleep over it. But she came in talking and talking and talking, mostly about herself. Her husband had passed a few months earlier, and she kept saying she couldn't bear to lose my mother-in-law too. And yes, I understood the grief in that. I did. But then she veered off into a long story about needing repairs done on her roof, something about mice in the attic, and then, out of nowhere, she started talking about the ghosts in her house being noisy and how she'd had to tell them to settle down. That part nearly got me, because I've been to her house. She does have spirits around her, sure. Most people do. But in her case, most of them are old pets she won't let go of. or pieces of people she just refuses to let rest. So no, it wasn't exactly some haunted house emergency. While she was saying all this, everybody else was trying to stay polite and serious, and there were Wyeth and Tomas standing beside her, pulling faces like children in the back pew of a church. Hand motions, exaggerated expressions, the whole bit, just doing their best to crack me. And somehow I held it together. But then she said she could see and hear ghosts. The second those words left her mouth, Wyeth and Tomas just lost patience completely. They got right up near her, yelling, waving, making a full spectacle of themselves. If she really could see and hear them, she had every opportunity in the world to prove it right there. She never reacted. So, in my opinion, she can't see or hear a thing. And that only confirmed what I already suspected, because if she truly could, then her husband would have had no trouble getting her attention. Instead, he's had to keep trying to reach someone who actually can hear him. And yes, I can. No, I'm not telling her. There are a couple reasons for that. First, after my husband's grandmother died, she and another sister sent my mother-in-law and her sons a cruel letter. I never read it myself, because my husband knows me well enough to worry about exactly how I'd respond. And honestly, that's fair. But I know enough to know it was ugly, and I know my name was in it too. Second, she has gone out of her way to pretend she never knew I'm pagan. She acted shocked when it came up, like it was some alarming new discovery, and tried to make my mother-in-law uneasy about me because of it. Well, Wyeth took that personally, and because Wyeth is exactly who he is, he decided that if she was going to play dumb and act like she never knew, then he was going to start dropping in at her house from time to time and stirring things up a little. Nothing too wild, just enough to rattle the air and keep things interesting. Then Tomas found out why, and naturally, he joined in. And the funniest part is, neither of them has ever been thrown out or driven off. Not by her, not by any spiritual force, not by anything in that house. According to them, she never reacts, not to them, and not even to the spirits that are actually there. So yes, I know it's petty, but I'd be lying to you if I said watching them mess with her doesn't make me laugh. You know, there are some places in Bangkok that feel completely ordinary in the daytime, but once night falls, they seem to carry a memory in the air. New Phetchaburi Road is one of those places. Let me tell you why. Late on the night of September 24th, 1990, just after 10 o'clock, that road became the center of one of the most horrifying tragedies the city had ever seen. A tanker truck loaded with liquefied petroleum gas lost control near the expressway exit and overturned in the middle of a busy stretch of traffic. In seconds, what had been a normal Bangkok night turned into chaos. A huge amount of gas spilled across the road, and then it caught fire. What happened next was almost beyond imagination. A massive fireball surged through the street, swallowing cars, motorcycles, shop fronts, and apartment buildings. People who had just been sitting in traffic or going about their night were suddenly trapped in an inferno. By the time everything was over, around 80 people had lost their lives, many more were badly injured, and entire parts of the neighborhood had been burned into ruin. The survivors who witnessed it never forgot what they saw. Some described people stumbling through the flames so badly burned they were barely recognizable. Those images stayed with the city, and honestly, once you hear about them, they stay with you too. But the story didn't end with the fire. Over the years, the disaster became woven into Bangkok's ghost lore, and part of the reason is the place itself. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, that area of New Phetchaburi was full of nightlife. There were bars, clubs, massage parlors, crowded dorms, cheap rented rooms, and all the restless energy of a city that never really slept. In Thai belief, places like that could already feel spiritually heavy, layered with desire, sorrow, exhaustion, and karma. So when so many people died there so suddenly and so violently, people believed something had been left behind. That's where the idea of Pi Tai Hong comes in. These are spirits of people who died unnatural, sudden deaths, especially those who never received proper rites. In Thai folk belief, those spirits don't always move on peacefully. Sometimes they linger. Sometimes they call out. Sometimes they make themselves known in ways you can't quite explain. One place that comes up again and again in these stories is the Bangkok Palace Hotel, not far from where the explosion happened. Officially, there's no proof connecting the hotel itself to the disaster in any supernatural way. But that hasn't stopped the stories. Guests and staff have spoken about footsteps in empty corridors, soft knocking on doors when nobody is there, whispers in quiet rooms, and elevators opening on their own as if someone unseen has just stepped inside. And then there's the darkest version of the tale. People say a man once woke up in his hotel room and found the person beside him no longer looked human, but like a burned body from the fire, while he himself was untouched. Whether that really happened or not, the story spread because it captured the fear people still carried, that the horror of that night had never fully left. In Thai belief, that makes sense. Spirits like Pi Tai Hom are said to affect the living through sensation, not always by appearing directly, but through smell, sound, pressure, and that uneasy feeling that tells you something is wrong even when you can't see it. And really, whether you believe in ghosts or not, these stories tell you something important. They show how deep a wound that night left on the city. When people experience sudden loss, especially on that scale, memory doesn't just stay in history books. It settles into places. It becomes ritual. It becomes folklore. It becomes the kind of story people whisper to each other when passing through after dark. That's why, even years later, people still make offerings, say prayers, and hold ceremonies for the dead. In Thai tradition, those acts matter. They help guide the spirits, yes, but they also help the living carry grief with respect. It's part comfort, part faith, and part responsibility to those who were taken too suddenly. So if you ever find yourself walking down New Phetchaburi Road late at night, and the street feels strangely quiet, or the air turns heavy, or you catch the faint scent of something burned when there's no fire in sight, you might remember this story. And maybe, just maybe, you'll feel it too. The sense that some nights in Bangkok never truly end. You know, if you walk through Causeway Bay today, it feels like pure motion. Neon, traffic, people everywhere, every corner humming with life. It is hard to imagine that one of the district's strangest stories began with something as ordinary as a marble wall. Back in the early 1980s, there was a well-known building called Winster House, finished just a few years earlier. Its entrance was lined with smooth white marble, the kind with soft gray veins running through it like frozen streams. Most people never gave it a second glance. It was just part of the building, part of the city. Then one afternoon, someone passing by stopped and noticed something odd in the stone. Hidden in the natural pattern was what looked like the face of an animal. Sharp ears, a narrow snout, a strange expression. Once that first person pointed it out, other people started looking too. And that is when things really took on a life of their own. Soon, people began saying there was not just one face, but several. Some swore they could see 6. Others insisted there were 7. Before long, the story had a name people would not forget: the 7 fox faces. What fascinates me is how quickly an ordinary wall became something people approached with caution. Neighbors stopped to stare. Shoppers slowed down. Office workers leaned in to inspect the marble for themselves. And once enough people said they saw fox-like faces, more and more others started seeing them too. The newspapers had a field day with it. Television picked it up as well. Suddenly, this was not just a curious pattern in stone. It became a city-wide rumor, then a warning, then almost a kind of omen. In those days, Hong Kong still held tightly to traditional beliefs, and stories like this could settle deep into the public imagination. Some feng shui practitioners weighed in, saying foxes carried strong yin energy. They said the number 7 was tied to misfortune, loss, and unrest. That kind of interpretation made people even more uneasy. A wall that might have been nothing more than marble and imagination began to feel charged with meaning. And then, as these stories always do, the rumors grew darker. One version said a banquet had once been held in the building, and the spirits connected to the fox faces had somehow been slighted. Not long after, a child was said to have fallen ill with a sudden fever and died. Another story told of a night watchman walking past the wall after midnight, hearing a thin sound in the air, almost like a baby crying, almost like wind slipping through a narrow space. When he looked up, people said the eye sockets in the marble seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. By morning, he had quit. There was even talk that management had arranged a tiny play area on the rooftop, meant as a peace offering to the unseen fox spirits. A few residents claimed that late at night they saw the shapes of children on the swings, moving gently back and forth without a sound. Not solid figures, more like pale shadows that flickered at the edge of sight. Now, whether any of that happened the way people described it, no one can really prove. But that is the thing about legends like this. They do not need proof to spread. They only need a crowd, a little fear, and one image people cannot unsee. Eventually, the building management decided enough was enough. Workers came in and removed the marble wall while reporters and curious onlookers watched. People said the cracking sound of the stone breaking apart echoed through the lobby. It felt dramatic, almost ceremonial, like the city was trying to tear the story out at its root. But the story did not disappear. Even after the wall was gone, people kept telling the tale. Years later, the old building was redeveloped, and the place took on a newer, more polished look, with glass and steel replacing the old surfaces. Still, the legend of the 7 fox faces stayed behind, folded into Hong Kong's folklore. And honestly, when you think about it, there is a simple explanation. Our minds are wired to find familiar shapes in randomness, especially faces. It is a psychological effect called pareidolia. Once someone points out a pattern, your brain starts helping you believe it is really there. But I do not think that explanation takes away the power of the story. Because this was never only about marble. It was about a time and a place where superstition, media, and everyday city life all blended together. It was about how fear can gather around something silent and still, until it feels almost alive. So even though the marble wall is long gone, the story lingers. And maybe that is the part that stays with you. Not whether the fox faces were real, but how easy it is, in the right moment, to look at something ordinary and feel a chill run through you anyway. You know, years ago, back through the late 1980s and into the 1990s, a few friends and I used to head down to the entrance at Lake Illawarra, near Windang, for all-night fishing trips. It was a bit of a ritual for us. We'd drive down from our side of town, set ourselves up near the water, throw in a line, crack open a few drinks, and stay out there until dawn. It's a beautiful spot, but it always carried a strange reputation. We'd all grown up hearing the same stories, that the entrance was haunted. most of us laughed it off. The stories usually came from fishermen, and fishermen have a gift for turning a shadow into a legend. People talked about hearing footsteps in the sand on still nights, even when no one was there. Others swore they'd heard faint voices drifting in from the surf. Some claimed they'd seen a figure moving along the shoreline, and a lot of people described that same feeling, like someone was standing just behind them, watching. At the time, I didn't put much weight on any of it. We were young, half the time we were drinking, sometimes a bit out of it, and not exactly in a state to notice every little thing around us. But even so, I'll be honest with you, there were nights when that feeling of being watched was so strong, it made the hairs on your neck stand up. Then one night, things shifted a bit. A mate of ours had a dog called Buddha. That night, Buddha came along with us, and out of nowhere he started acting up. Not playful, not restless, properly unsettled. He was growling into the scrub behind us, barking hard, pacing, staring into the dark like he could see something we couldn't. He kept it up for hours. We tried to laugh it off and said it was probably rabbits moving through the bushes because there were always plenty around there. Still, the dog never really calmed down. Over the months after that, we went back plenty of times. Buddha came along on and off and seemed completely normal again, so we stopped thinking much about it. But then came the night I still can't explain. My mate Stevie was fishing, maybe 100 meters or so away from me with Buddha beside him. It was quiet except for the water and the occasional clink of gear, and then I heard the dog start barking in the distance. Not long after that, I saw a torch beam jerking wildly through the dark. At first it was sweeping across the area like Stevie was searching for something. Then suddenly the light fixed in my direction and started bouncing fast, getting brighter and brighter. It was Stevie, sprinting flat out toward me. I'd never seen him like that. He was terrified, properly terrified. When he finally reached us, he said he'd seen a figure nearby. He described it as moving in a strange way, hunched over, like it was bending down to pick something up. Then, just like that, it vanished. Gone. No sound, no footsteps, nothing. Just there 1 second and not there the next. Another mate, Daz, and I didn't believe him. We thought he'd spooked himself in the dark, maybe seen someone real and panicked, maybe imagined the rest. But Stevie swore black and blue that what he saw wasn't normal. He said he'd never go back there again, and he never did. That was probably the point where I stopped laughing at the stories. After that, I started digging into the history of the area, and what I found only made things darker. There had been terrible events tied to that place. Reports of a human skull being found. A heartbreaking case involving a mother and her baby. Another story about a body discovered without its head. Real tragedies. Real grief. And once you know those things happened, it changes the way you stand there in the dark listening to the surf. So I keep coming back to the same question. Are these sightings just stories people pass around because the place already feels heavy? Are they born from fear? From local legend? From too many late nights and too much imagination? Or is something else there? Something tied to the sorrow that seems to cling to that stretch of water and sand? I can't tell you for certain what Stevie saw. I can't tell you what that couple saw either. But I can tell you this. Out at the entrance, in the quiet, when the wind drops and the sea goes low and restless, you can feel something. And once you've felt it for yourself, it's very hard to brush it off as nothing. I want to tell you about a place that stayed with me for years. A stretch of land people know as the Crimson Mile. I first came across it while digging through old local history, and from that moment, I couldn't let it go. The more I learned, the more it felt like this place was holding on to something heavy, something unsettled. Over time, I kept returning there, usually on my own. In the daylight, it can seem almost harmless at first, quiet, still. But even then, I've caught things that never sat right with me. More than once, I've seen a dark figure standing far off along the path, just still, watching. And every single time, the moment I blink or try to focus, it's gone. Other times, it seems to slip between the trees, as if it knows I can feel it there. The spot I'm talking about is where the old Minamura railway station once stood, near the original gates of Dunmore House. Long ago, that station was built for the wealthy Fuller family, who lived nearby, and it operated from the 1870s until the early 1940s. The footpath there now used to be the original road, and the railway line still runs close beside it. One day, while I was taking photos, I noticed something in the distance near a little bridge by the water. It looked like a black figure standing there. I'd seen that same shape before, but that was the first time I ever managed to catch it on camera. Not long after, I took another photo, and there it was again, this time deeper in the trees, almost like it was following me. Sometimes it looks like it's wrapped in a dark cloak. Sometimes it's just a shape, but it always feels aware. There's also an old bench seat near the path, and I have to be honest with you, that place gives me a dreadful feeling. Sitting there alone, especially as evening closes in, is like waiting for something you can't see to move closer. The sounds from the bush seem to change after dark. Every creak, every rustle starts to feel personal. What makes it worse is the history tied to that exact area. So many people lost their lives near the gates of Dunmore House and the old station. There were suicides, fatal accidents, gruesome discoveries, and sudden deaths stretching across decades. Even after the station was abandoned and moved farther south, and even after the gates were relocated to make way for the newer road, tragedies seemed to keep finding that same ground. One story that never left me was about a family driving home from a holiday along the south coast. Just past the bridge near the gates, their car struck the back of a truck carrying protruding logs. The mother was killed instantly in a horrifying way, right in front of her husband and children. And as if that wasn't cruel enough, more heartbreak followed that family in the years after. It's one of those stories that clings to the air when you stand there. Then there are the stranger accounts. People have long claimed they heard a baby crying in the middle of the night along that road. I used to dismiss that until I uncovered an older tragedy from 1916. A woman named Mrs. Lambert was riding home in a horse and buggy when it jolted violently near the gates. She was thrown clear, but the baby in her arms was flung onto the roadside and killed. After learning that, those stories didn't sound so easy to laugh off anymore. And it isn't only the dark figure. Some people, myself included, have sensed something else there, something shapeless, almost like a drifting black mass. Not always fully seen, more felt than anything. It leaves you drained, dizzy, strangely hollow, as though the place itself is pulling energy straight out of you. So when I walk that path now, camera in hand, I don't just feel like I'm exploring local history. I feel like I'm stepping into a place where the past never really settled. A place that still watches, still remembers. And honestly, once you know what happened there, you start to wonder what else is still waiting in the dark. You know, I still think about this sometimes. It all happened during the summer of 2022, when I'd completely flipped my sleep schedule. Since school was out, I was up all night and sleeping half the day like a full-time creature of darkness. Most nights I'd leave my room and hang out in the living room because my older brother was staying with us then, along with his girlfriend and their little boy, so the bedroom was crowded and I needed some air. At first, it was small stuff. Strange stuff, but small. We had these dark fluorescent grow lights for my mom's plants, and at night, those lights would start flickering. The kitchen light would do it too. Sometimes they'd dim, sometimes they'd cut off, sometimes they just refused to come back on right away. And sure, you can explain that away. Old house, old wiring, whatever. Then my nephew's toys started going off on their own. And I don't mean one toy making a little random sound once. I mean toys making noise when nobody was touching them, sometimes when they weren't even switched on. Still, even then, I tried to stay reasonable. I told myself there had to be some normal explanation. Batteries, faulty wiring, coincidence. All of that mostly happened at night too, usually somewhere between 8 p.m. and 5 in the morning. But then came the moment that really settled it in my mind. It was early June, around 3:56 in the morning. I got up to use the bathroom while everybody else was asleep. My mom, my little sister, my older brother, his girlfriend, and my nephew. Now, there are two things that matter here. First, the floors in that old house were ridiculously creaky. I mean, if anybody so much as shifted their weight in the hallway, you'd hear it. Second, the bathroom was right down the same hallway as the bedrooms, so if someone had stepped out of a room, I would have heard the door open. So I'm in the bathroom, finishing up, washing my hands, and then I hear it. The floorboards. Creaking. Slow, steady footsteps in the hallway outside the bathroom. At first, I froze and just listened. It sounded like someone pacing back and forth, up and down the hall, like they were waiting for me to come out. And that was what made it so wrong. If it had been anybody in my family, I would have heard their bedroom door. And honestly, somebody would have already knocked, tried the handle, or called out. We were not exactly a respect privacy at all costs type of household. But this thing didn't do any of that. It just kept pacing, back and forth, back and forth. I stood there staring at the door, listening, trying to make sense of it. Then finally, I reached for the doorknob. And the second my hand touched it, the pacing stopped. Not slowed down, not faded. Stopped. I waited another minute in total silence, heart pounding, trying to decide whether I was about to open the door to a person or to something I couldn't explain. Eventually, I opened it. Nobody. The hallway was empty. The living room was empty. I looked into the bedrooms, and everyone was still asleep. I checked the kitchen too, turned lights on, looked around, and there was absolutely no one there. And this is where I made a mistake. Trying to act tough, or maybe just trying not to admit I was scared, I said out loud, kind of joking, that whatever it was needed to leave and that it didn't belong there. Real brave, right? So I turned the lights back off and started heading toward the hallway. The second I switched off that hallway light, I heard the floorboards explode with sound, like something took off running straight at me. After that, things went back to being quieter, but not normal. Mostly the lights kept acting up, even after we tried fixing them. And one night, around 4 a.m., I was sitting in the living room when every light suddenly went out at once. The whole room went cold, just instantly cold, and I felt something breathe right into my face. I can still remember that part in a way that makes my skin crawl. Nothing else happened in that house that was as intense as that, at least not to me. But those weren't my only experiences. Truthfully, a lot of my family has had moments we can't explain. This was just one cluster of encounters from 2022 that stuck with me more than most. And I'll be honest with you, those experiences changed how I look at the world. I'm not especially religious, and I still think skepticism matters. I think you should question things. You should look for the logical answer first. But after nights like that, I just can't completely dismiss things people call impossible. To me, it feels less like that can't exist, and more like maybe most of us are just lucky enough not to cross paths with it. Anyway, that's the story. And if you've ever had something happen that you still can't explain, trust me, I'd believe you enough to listen. I'd say I'm about 3/4 a believer and 1/4 skeptic. There have been a handful of things in my life that pulled me toward believing, even though, if I'm being honest, every one of them could probably be explained away somehow. The first thing happened maybe 20 or so years ago. There was this one particular streetlight I used to pass under at night, and almost every time I drove beneath it, it would shut off. It didn't matter whether it was early evening or late at night. If I went under it, the light would go out. It happened so many times over the years that I stopped thinking of it as coincidence. I never had a real explanation for it, and then eventually, just like that, it stopped happening. The second thing reaches further back, to World War II. My uncle served in the Navy aboard a destroyer in the Pacific. His ship was hit by a Japanese submarine, and he was killed. I was born a few months later and named after him, which always made that story feel personal to me. Then years later, in 1969, I was a young naval officer attending my cousin's wedding in Annapolis. While I was walking around the grounds, I came across this small stone building. I hadn't been searching for anything in particular, and I didn't even know what it was. When I stepped inside, I learned it housed the crypt of John Paul Jones. In the center of the room was a glass display case holding a massive book. Inside were the names of Navy ships with their crew members listed on separate pages. Each day, they'd open the case, turn a page, and honor a different ship and crew for the next 24 hours. Since there were so many pages, it took years before the cycle started over again. And on the exact day I happened to wander in there, the ship being honored was my uncle's ship. His name was right there on the page. Was that a sign? I honestly don't know, but it stayed with me. The third thing happened after my mother died in 2000. About 3 months later, I was sitting on the front steps of my house when 2 snowy owls appeared in my yard. One landed on a tree branch, and the other settled on the ground maybe 30 feet away. They both just looked at me, calmly, for several minutes before flying off. Now, snowy owls are not something you normally see where I live. They tend to stay closer to the coast or marshland, and I live several miles inland in a wooded area. I'd been living in that house for decades, and that was the only time I ever saw snowy owls there, or anywhere nearby for that matter. What made it feel even stranger was that my mother had been an identical twin, and my aunt had died many years before she did. So of course the thought crossed my mind. Was that the two of them, stopping by together? I can't prove that, and I know how that sounds, but it's hard not to wonder. The fourth thing happened after my son-in-law died from cancer. A few months later, I was at my daughter's house helping her clean up. I was down in the garage, which sits under the house, and I had gone in through one of those lightweight hollow doors. I remember clearly closing it behind me. A few minutes later, that door flew open and slammed hard against the wall with a bang that made me jump. No one else was in the house, and there wasn't any wind that could have done it. That one really got to me. So that's where I am. I want to believe, but I'm still cautious. I still question everything. At the same time, when enough moments pile up in a life, you start to feel like maybe they're not all random. Maybe they don't prove anything outright, but together they make it harder to dismiss it all. So I remain skeptical, but I'm leaning a little more toward belief than I used to be. You know, I grew up hearing this story from my grandmother when I was little, back in a quiet town in Colombia. She never told it like it was some dramatic legend, and she definitely did not use it to frighten us into behaving. The way she talked about it was calm, almost casual, like she was describing the weather or an old neighbor. like it was simply one of those things that could happen if you lived there long enough. There was a narrow river just beyond our neighborhood. During the day, it felt ordinary. People went there to rinse clothes, sit on the rocks, gossip a little, cool off when the heat got heavy. But once night came, hardly anyone went near it. I remember being about 14 when I finally asked her why. She looked at me for a second, very still, and then she said, "Because sometimes you can hear her." She meant La Llorona. Of course, I already knew the name. Most kids in Colombia do. But to me, it was just one of those stories adults pass around. Something meant to keep children from wandering too far after dark. I thought that was all it was, but my grandmother told it differently. She said it was not like the versions people put in films or online. She said sometimes you do not see anything at all. Sometimes you only hear her. She told me that when she was younger, maybe 16 or 17, she and her cousin had been walking home after spending the evening at a friend's house. It was late, and the road near the river was dim because the streetlights never really reached that stretch. At first, everything felt normal. Quiet, but normal. Then they heard someone crying. Not loud, not sharp, just this low, distant sound, like someone sobbing somewhere in the dark. Her cousin stopped first and asked, "Do you hear that too?" My grandmother said they both stood there listening, not moving, trying to place where it was coming from. It seemed to drift from the riverbank. And then she told me the part that always stayed with me. She said it did not sound like ordinary crying. It sounded stretched out somehow, hollow and thin, as if the night itself were carrying it farther than it should. Her cousin whispered, "Let's leave." But before they could take another step, they heard something else. A voice, faint, broken, like someone calling out for her children. My grandmother said that was the moment they ran. They did not look behind them. They did not slow down. They just ran until they were back where the houses were close together and the dark did not feel so wide. When they got home, they told her father what they had heard. She said he did not even look shocked. He just asked them one thing. Did it sound close or far away? They told him it sounded far, and he nodded. Then he said something my grandmother never forgot, and honestly, neither have I. If it sounds far away, you're safe. Years later, I asked her what he meant by that. She told me people in town believed something strange about La Llorona. If you hear her and she sounds distant, then she really is far away. But if the crying sounds very close to you, then she isn't. For a long time, I treated that story like an old belief, the kind families keep alive because it becomes part of the place. I listened, I remembered it, but I never fully believed it. Then a few years ago, I went back to visit my grandmother. One night, I was standing outside the house close to midnight. The river is still there, maybe 10 minutes away on foot. Everything was still. No voices, no wind, just that heavy quiet small towns get after dark. And then I heard it. Crying. Soft. Faint. It sounded far away. So I went inside and told my grandmother, almost expecting her to smile and brush it off. But she didn't. She looked at me very seriously and asked me the exact same question her father had asked her all those years before. Did it sound close or far away? I want to tell you something that changed me completely. For most of my life, I didn't believe in anything paranormal. I used to call myself an atheist, and I brushed off stories about ghosts, spirits, or strange encounters as fear, superstition, or people letting their imagination run wild. That was who I was. Until one night when I was 16. I was asleep in my room, alone, like any normal night. I had drifted off lying partly on my side, with my body turned awkwardly toward the ceiling. Then I suddenly woke up. The moment my eyes opened, I saw someone standing in my room. He was near the foot of my bed, off to my right side, just standing there and staring directly at me. My room was but this figure was that's the part I can never explain. It was like his shape swallowed up what little light was there. I could clearly make out a tall silhouette, and what stood out most was that he was wearing a hat. I know how ridiculous that sounds when you say it out loud. People hear that part and either laugh or stop taking you seriously. But that's exactly what I saw. He was very tall, somewhere around 6.5 feet, maybe even taller. And his eyes. I remember his eyes most of all. They weren't red. They were this cold, unnatural blue, fixed right on me. I tried to move. I tried to yell. Nothing happened. I was completely paralyzed. My body wouldn't respond, and my head was stuck facing his direction, like I was forced to keep looking at him. I can't even put into words how intense the panic was. Inside, I was spiraling. I was in a way I had never experienced before. But at the same time, something else rose up in me too. Anger. I remember thinking, almost screaming in my own mind, trying to fight back, cursing at him in my head, wanting to attack him, wanting him gone. But he never moved. He just stood there, watching me, like he knew exactly how afraid I was. After what felt like forever, I shut my eyes because I couldn't stand looking at him anymore. I was that scared. And that was the moment I started praying to Jesus. I hadn't been someone who prayed much before that, but in that moment it came out of me naturally, like it was the only thing I had left. Then everything went blank. The next thing I remember, I woke up again. This time I could move. I could speak. It felt like I had blacked out or passed out from fear after closing my eyes. I sat there crying, to my core. I had never seen anything like that before, never felt that kind of helplessness. Afterward, I tried to be rational about it. I told myself it had to be a nightmare. That's what any reasonable person would do, right? I kept trying to explain it away. But deep down, I knew what bothered me most. I didn't feel like I had been dreaming. I felt awake, fully awake. I remember my eyes being open. I remember the room. I remember him. That experience stayed with me. It haunted me for a long time. I felt like I was losing my mind trying to make sense of it. Eventually, I searched online just to see if anyone had ever described something similar. And that's when things got even stranger. I found story after story from people describing the same figure. A tall, dark man wearing a hat, standing and watching them, often during moments of paralysis. Some people even had a name for him, the Hat Man. Reading that shook me. Part of me felt relieved that I wasn't alone, that I hadn't just invented something out of nowhere. But another part of me was deeply unsettled, because it seemed to confirm that what I saw wasn't just some private nightmare. Other people had seen him too. I've never seen him again since that night, and I hope I never do. But ever since then, I pray before I go to sleep. Every night. Not out of habit, but because that experience left something in me that never fully went away. I'm 25 now, and I'm only recently starting to tell this story honestly. For years I kept it to myself because I knew how it would sound. I knew people would doubt it, laugh at it, or dismiss it. But I know what I experienced, and I know how deeply it affected me. So I'm sharing it with you now because maybe you've seen something similar. Maybe you've had an experience you couldn't explain, and you've kept it quiet for the same reasons I did. And if you have, I'd really want to hear your story too. Let me tell you about something that happened when I was a kid. Back in 2003, right after my family moved into this house, in a quiet suburban neighborhood where every place looked almost identical. The house itself wasn't especially old. maybe 15 or 20 years at most, nothing with some grand haunted history attached to it. And honestly, at the time, it just felt like another house. We only lived there for less than a year before my parents separated and we moved again. What I remember most from those first months is that we had this little family routine. We'd all sit down together and watch American Idol. That probably sounds small, but for us, doing anything all together like that was actually kind of rare, so I really looked forward to it. My dad was rooting hard for Clay. My mom was completely on Ruben's side, and my younger sister Maya and I didn't really care who won. We were mostly just happy to be there, sharing the moment. Most evenings had the same rhythm. We'd get home from school or sports or wherever we'd been, eat dinner, and then my sister and I would race each other upstairs to shower before the show started. The hot water in that house disappeared ridiculously fast, so going second was basically a punishment. There was also this bathroom off my parents' bedroom, but it never really got used, and their whole room always felt strangely off limits to me. Not scary exactly, just unsettling in that way certain parts of a house can be when you're a kid. One night after dinner, instead of going our separate ways, we were all hanging out in the living room. I was perched on the end of the couch near the front hall, where I could see straight into the kitchen, the staircase, and the front door. My sister was in the kitchen getting herself a drink when my mom said, "All right, if you two want to watch Idol, go shower and get your pajamas on now before it starts." The second my mom said that, I heard Maya set her cup down and bolt for the stairs. I jumped up right after her because there was no way I was willingly signing up for a freezing shower. She had a good head start, maybe 10 feet, and I can still picture her running ahead of me in this oversized pink sleep shirt, laughing as she went. You know that kind of half laugh, half scream little sisters do when they know they're being chased? That's exactly what it was. She scrambled up the stairs on all fours like kids do, and I reached out and grabbed at her ankle, just playing around, trying to slow her down enough to beat her to the bathroom. I felt her leg. I remember that part so clearly. She slipped away and kept going. By the time we got to the top of the stairs, I already knew she was probably going to win, but I still chased her down the hallway because of course I did. I was 11. There was no universe where I was going to just give up politely. She got to the bathroom first. I swung myself around the banister and made one last desperate lunge toward the door just as she ran in. And right away, something felt wrong. She didn't turn the light on. She didn't slam the door shut either, which is exactly what she would have done if she'd beaten me there. So I stopped for a second and thought maybe she was hiding just inside, waiting to scare me. I got quiet, trying to turn it around on her, and then I jumped into the dark bathroom and shouted, "Boo!" But she wasn't there. I turned back, convinced I had to be missing something. And then, while I was standing there trying to make sense of it, my mom called upstairs asking whether I was going to shower or not, because Maya didn't want to miss the beginning of the episode. I stepped down a couple of stairs until I could see the living room. And there she was, sitting on the floor in front of the TV like she'd been there the whole time. I didn't say anything. I just took my shower and went on with the night like nothing had happened. Even then, I think some part of me just refused to deal with it. But I've never forgotten it. What sticks with me most isn't just the image of her running ahead of me. It's the physical feeling of it. Grabbing her ankle, hearing her laugh. The whole thing felt completely real, solid, ordinary. Until suddenly, it wasn't. Now, years later, I still go back and forth about it. Maybe it was some incredibly vivid childhood dream that got tangled up with real memories. Maybe it was a hallucination. Maybe my brain stitched together pieces of different nights and turned them into one story. Honestly, that's probably the most reasonable explanation. But even now, with all my skepticism, it still feels real to me in a way that's hard to explain. The strange part is, I don't remember being scared. Not then. Just confused. Deeply, weirdly disoriented. Like reality had skipped for half a second, and I was the only one who noticed. Looking back on it now, that memory still sends a chill up the back of my neck. And I still can't fully explain why. Let me tell you about something that still unsettles me when I think about it. In late 2024, two of my closest friends were getting married, and because I was in the wedding party, I helped plan a shared bachelorette trip for them. We decided to spend the weekend near a Connecticut aquarium that meant a lot to them, since it was close to where they'd gotten engaged. There were 7 of us altogether, me and my partner, the 2 brides, their 2 maids of honor, and 1 more close friend. Because everyone was driving in from different places, I rented this beautiful old house near the water. It had a wide porch, a couple of big bathrooms, and that cozy mix of historic charm with modern updates. I'm not going to share where it was, just out of respect for the owner. The first day was honestly perfect. We took pictures outside by the river, wandered through shops, had dinner at this wonderful little Italian place, and ended the night back at the house playing party games and laughing ourselves silly. Everybody eventually drifted off to bed. The brides took 1 room upstairs. The maids of honor shared the room across from them. My partner and I stayed in the downstairs bedroom, and our other friend slept on a futon in the enclosed porch. The strange part started the next morning. I'd slept deeply, which almost never happens for me. I'm usually the kind of person who wakes up at every little sound, even in my own home. The brides seemed totally normal too, but the other 4 people in our group looked off. Quiet, drained, uneasy. At first I thought maybe it was just from the night before, except that didn't really fit. One of them hadn't been drinking at all, and my partner never overdoes it. Something else was clearly wrong. Nobody wanted to say it out loud. Not at first. The brides went upstairs after breakfast, and once they were out of earshot, I pulled the others together and said, basically, "Please, just tell me what happened." I knew they didn't want to ruin the trip, but we needed to be honest with each other. One of the maids of honor finally spoke up. She said she'd fallen asleep easily enough, but all night she'd had these awful dreams. In one of them, she was sitting at the kitchen island, and from there, she could see the doorway to the pantry. She said there were children there, peeking around the frame and watching her. One of them was an older boy, maybe around 10, pale, with dark hair cut short around his face. The others were younger, around 6 or 7, a boy and a girl. What terrified her most was their eyes. Not dark eyes. Completely black eyes. She said they never threatened her, never came toward her, never said a word, but she knew in the dream that they weren't living children. She felt certain they were dead, and that they had been dead for a very long time. Then the other maid of honor said she'd dreamed about children too. She hadn't seen them clearly, but she heard them. In her dream, their voices were coming through the heating vent along the kitchen wall near the pantry. She couldn't make out exact words, just the sound of multiple children trying to reach her. That frightened her enough on its own. Then our friend from the porch admitted they dreamed about children too, only theirs were outside in the backyard behind the house. They said it was more like sensing them than really interacting with them, like the children were there but keeping their distance. And then there was my partner. He was reluctant to talk, which immediately made me nervous, because he's usually very open with me. He finally admitted he'd had dreams about the same children too, but I could tell he was holding something back. Later, when we were alone in our room, he told me the rest. Hearing that absolutely broke my heart. By then, all of us had agreed not to tell the brides. It was their weekend, and we didn't want to put fear or sadness into something that was supposed to be joyful. We only had one more stretch of time in the house before leaving for the day anyway, and nobody was going back to sleep there. Before we left, my partner hung back for a moment inside the house alone. Later, he told me he'd spoken quietly toward the pantry, just in case anything was really there. He told the children they didn't have to stay, that whoever had hurt them couldn't control them anymore, that they could leave. We never experienced anything else after that. We left later that afternoon and didn't spend another night there. Since then, I've looked into old cases in that part of Connecticut. I've found stories about missing children, murdered children, tragedies that make your stomach drop. But I've never found anything that matches exactly what everyone described. Not 3 children together, not connected clearly to that house, not anything solid enough to explain what happened. And honestly, that leaves me with the part that scares me most. Maybe those children were real, and somehow 4 people brushed up against the same piece of pain in that house. But if they weren't real, if no such crime ever happened there, then what was it that reached into all those dreams and told the same story in almost the same way? What could create something that consistent, that vivid, across that many people at once? That's the question I still can't shake. I want to tell you about something that happened when I was really little, around 4 years old. I'm in my 30s now, and I still remember that night with this strange, sharp clarity, like it never really left me. There were a lot of unsettling things that happened in that house, but this was the moment that cracked everything open. Before I get into it, you need a little background. My family had deep roots in a tiny town in southeast Kansas. We're talking generations. My mom grew up there, moved away as a teenager with her mother, and then her whole life got ripped apart in a terrible car accident. She was the only one who survived. After weeks in a coma, she woke up to lawsuits, grief, and eventually a settlement. Not long after that, her father brought her back to that same small Kansas town. She was still so young. She went back to high school, met my dad, got pregnant with me, and by 17 she was married and trying to build a life. My parents bounced between rentals for a while, always ending up in cramped, run-down places. So when my mom had the chance to buy a home, she took it. That's how we ended up in that house. It was a huge, old 2-story place across from the high school. The kind of house people always had stories about, even if they'd never set foot inside. Built way back in the 1800s, full of age and history and that kind of silence old houses seem to carry in their walls. My mom thought it was beautiful the first time she saw it, and honestly, I understand why. It had this worn, grand feeling to it. Not long after we moved in, my parents split up. My dad left, and for most of the next several years, it was just my mom and me in that house. The layout matters, so stay with me for a second. When you came through the front door, there was this big staircase right in the center. To the left was a small sitting room. To the right, a larger living space with a wide opening where double doors had probably once been. Under the stairs was the bathroom, and toward the back of the house was the kitchen and laundry area, which felt like it had once been a porch that somebody enclosed. Upstairs was stranger. The stairs came up near the back of the house. To the right at the top was my room. To the left was a long hallway. My mom's room sat off the middle of that hall, and at the very end was this room we called the balcony room. Now, the first big thing happened on a chilly autumn night in 1995. My mom and I had been at her friend Jay's place most of the evening. Everybody called him Jaybird. I remember music playing, people laughing, that whole messy young adult energy that surrounded my mom back then. She was only in her early 20s, still trying to outrun a lot of pain, and I got dragged along for all of it. Still, as a little kid, I liked being around grown-ups who were in good moods. They were kind to me. It felt lively. It felt safe enough. Anyway, sometime around 2 in the morning, maybe later, we headed home. We pulled into the driveway by the garage, which sat a little ways behind the house. From there, you could see the upstairs windows glowing through thin curtains. Our bedroom lights were on, just like we'd left them. Nothing looked wrong. Nothing felt off. We walked in through the back door into the laundry room, then into the kitchen. The light from the front living room was spilling faintly through the house. And then we heard it. Footsteps. Heavy ones. Thud, 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 thud. Not outside, not next door. Inside the house. My mom froze. I froze. We moved toward the living room and listened harder. She called out, "Hello?" Nothing. Just footsteps. My mom called again, louder this time. "Who's up there?" No answer. The footsteps got harder, heavier. They weren't just steps anymore. They were stomps. In an old house, you don't just hear something like that. You feel it. The floor itself carried it down into your legs. Then my mom shouted one last time, and suddenly the stomping stopped. Just stopped. For half a breath, everything was still. Then whatever was upstairs started coming toward us. I felt it move down the hallway, then onto the staircase. Fast. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Closer and closer, pounding down those stairs like someone was about to burst into view. My mom and I were just rooted there, staring into the darkness, waiting for somebody, anybody, to appear. The stomping came all the way down to the bottom step, and there was nothing there. Nothing. I still remember the shape of that emptiness, that awful empty space where someone should have been. Then the stomping turned and ran back up the stairs, around the landing, and down the hall again. That snapped my mom out of it. She grabbed me, ran out the back door, and carried me to the car so fast I could barely breathe. We drove straight back to Jaybird's place. When my mom told him what happened, he didn't believe her. He thought someone was messing with us. But she begged him to come back and see for himself, so he did. This time we parked in front and went through the front door. The second we stepped inside and reached the foot of the stairs, we heard it again. The same stomping. Jaybird tried to explain it away. Said somebody must have climbed in through a window, that maybe there was a ladder outside. So we all went around the house checking. There was no ladder, no broken window, no sign anyone had gotten in. We went back inside, and once again the stomping came down the stairs, all the way to the bottom, stopping right in front of us where nothing stood. That was enough for him. He ushered us out and told us we were staying at his place for the night. The next morning we came back in daylight. Sunlight filled the upstairs hallway, and everything looked completely normal. Nothing had been moved, no signs of a break-in, no explanation waiting for us in the morning. After that, Jaybird didn't come around much. My mom and I talked about that night for a little while, but not for long. After a while, she started brushing it off, pretending it was a joke or that we must have misunderstood what happened. I think she was scared in a way she didn't know how to talk about, and instead of facing it, she buried it. Years later, long after we left that house, she finally admitted to me that she believed it had been haunted all along. But at the time, she denied everything. That became its own kind of wound. As I got older, the story followed me. I was already the odd kid at school. Quiet, awkward, more interested in music and weird little hobbies than sports or fitting in. And one day, when some kid asked if they could sleep over at my house, I answered without thinking. Sure, but my house is haunted. You can imagine how that went. By the end of the day, everybody knew. By the next day, adults knew. Suddenly, people weren't just whispering that I was weird, they were wondering what was wrong with me. Or worse, what kind of things my mother had exposed me to. The truth is, at that age, I wasn't even traumatized by the haunting part. I was fascinated. The staircase incident had been so intense, but after that, the house mostly settled into smaller things. A door shutting when no one was near it. Floor creaks in the middle of the night. A few piano notes sounding from another room. Little things. Enough to make you pause, but not enough to prove anything. And every time I tried to talk about it, my mom would shut me down. My mom had a revolving cast of friends back then. Sometimes she rented out rooms to them, just to get by, since she didn't have a mortgage hanging over her head. Life in that house was loose, chaotic, unpredictable. No bedtimes, late nights, adults everywhere. Sometimes they'd turn off all the lights and play hide and seek with me through the house after midnight, which sounds fun until you remember the house we were in. Other nights, I'd sit out near the balcony room and beg them to tell me ghost stories. And every so often, I'd overhear one of them talking quietly about something strange that had happened to them there. That always stuck with me, because I wanted to understand it. I wanted it to make sense. The house seemed to get worse whenever my mom's relationships got worse. That was the pattern I noticed, even as a kid. There was one boyfriend, Dean, who was decent enough. I didn't love him, but he was kinder than most of the men she brought home. They were together about a year, and when things started falling apart between them, the house changed. The random noises got more frequent. The cats started staring into empty doorways, especially upstairs. The balcony room felt wrong in a way that's hard to explain unless you felt a room go sour for no reason. And then I started having experiences of my own. One evening, near the end of their relationship, my mom and Dean left me home alone for a while. I was fine with it because I had a Nintendo 64, and that was enough to keep my whole little universe occupied. I was sitting on the floor in the big living room, completely absorbed in a game, when I heard my mom's voice behind me say, "Oh, hey." Casual, friendly, like she'd just spotted someone walking in. I barely reacted at first because people came and went all the time. Then my stomach dropped. The back door hadn't opened, and my mom wasn't home. I turned off the game, turned off the TV, sat there in silence, staring at the dark screen, hoping maybe I'd catch a reflection behind me or hear another sound that would prove I hadn't imagined it. When I finally stood up and turned around, the whole house felt wrong. I could see the smaller living room, the stairs, the bathroom doorway, the kitchen, and I had this overwhelming feeling that something was standing in every open doorway, watching me. I couldn't see anyone, but I felt watched from all sides. I bolted out the front door and ran across the street towards some kids playing ball nearby. I begged one older boy to come back with me because I was convinced someone was inside the house. He did. We went room to room. The doors were open. Hot summer air was blowing through the house. Everything looked normal, but that feeling was still there. We were not alone. At least that's what it felt like to me. Halfway through searching upstairs, my mom and Dean came back. I told them what happened, and instead of comforting me, my mom got angry. She thanked the boy, sent him away, and scolded me for bringing a stranger into the house. A couple of days later, something happened that finally scared me for real. I'd moved my game console into my mom's room because it felt smaller, safer, easier to keep an eye on. I was sitting there playing while my mom and Dean were gone again, trying to relax. I had snacks, cold air blowing from the window unit, the TV humming in front of me. At one point, I got up, ran to the bathroom, then came back and sat down again, this time with my back to the open bedroom door. A little while later, I felt a finger touch my back. Not a brush, not fabric shifting, a finger. It touched just below my shoulder blade and caught my shirt slightly as it slid away. I knew exactly what I felt. I ran. When I came back from a weekend away, the whole house felt different, heavier, darker somehow, even in daylight. The air itself felt thick. That night, I slept in my mom's bed. Moonlight was pouring through the room, bright enough that I could make out nearly everything. My mom was already asleep beside me, and I was lying there facing the open bedroom door. Then I heard the first stair creak. That sound was unmistakable. Somebody was coming up the stairs. Because of the angle from the bed, I could see into part of the hallway and over toward the staircase. At first I felt relieved, because the figure coming up looked like a man. Tall, thin. For one hopeful second, I thought Dean had come back. But as it reached the top of the stairs, I realized that wasn't a man. It was the shape of one, a dark silhouette. No face, no features. Just a person-shaped shadow moving with purpose. It walked down the hallway and turned into my mom's room. I watched it come to the bed. It stood beside my mother for a moment, then lifted the blanket, climbed into bed next to her, and vanished. Just like that. Gone. The covers settled back down as if someone had just lain there and then dissolved into the dark. I did not sleep the rest of that night. I lay there, frozen, staring into the room until sunrise. And the next morning, when I told my mom, she denied it again. That house never really got better after that. My mom moved on to someone new, and the uglier life got inside those walls, the uglier the atmosphere in the house became. It felt like the place fed on tension, on cruelty, on fear. Things got worse between my mom and the man she was with, and the activity got worse too. By then I understood something I hadn't been able to put into words before. It wasn't just that the house was haunted. It was that the house seemed to wake up when our lives were falling apart. And once it woke up, it never really let us forget it was there.